Good night, you princes of Maine, you DUNKINGs of New England. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Poobah of Fraser, and all-around nice guy, Sejohn. I'm really happy to have the time with you. It's Sejohn Sarrowick. Sejohn, what's up?
Not much, man. You're doing okay. You sound like you need a buddy today. What's going on?
No. I'm in a good mood because there's somebody at the door. No, I don't know. I made myself laugh with that intro. I've been up since about 5 a.m. And I'm very excited to record. We got a lot of things to cover in this episode.
Just to be clear, you say intro, but you mean like
Me going, hi, and welcome to the Say Report. And that
literally
cracked me up. I don't know why.
Just like that, you think of like our pre-conversation as like the intro, your own personal intro for the show.
No, but it was not just what we did, which was good, but it was literally how I decided to deliver hello and welcome to the Say Report today, which was not like that. Hi. Woo, Sejohn, we got to start with a correction and an apology, errors and omissions and all of that. Last week, at the end, I congratulated the San Francisco 49ers for winning the Super Bowl. and that didn't happen.
Yelled at by Kels.
You know what really bothered me about that? Yeah, we're just jumping into it. I have no problem with Travis Kelce yelling at his coach. Emotions are high, right? Like, I've been there. I've been in a championship game. Yelling is one thing. Shoving his coach that way was really like, man, that is over the line. And I'm the guy who essentially pulled off my skate and tried to stab somebody playing hockey. So
Wait, say that again. What happened next?
He pushed his coach. He shouldn't have put hands on his coach. That really bothers me.
I mean, kind of. I don't know. It's all wrapped up in the same thing for me. And I will say this: since then, both the coach and him have both like talked about the incident, and neither one seems to be like holding on to it. So like, I don't know why the rest of the world is when the two people involved aren't. No, yeah, and apparently the other side of that is also that coach is kind of known for being equally
abusive,
hot-headed, shall we say, towards other people. So there was also kind of this moment where everybody watching was like, "Oh no, what is Kelce doing?" And then like anybody that's an actual Chiefs fan is just like, "Finally." I don't know, man. But that I don't know. That shit, what a weird thing for people to be holding on to. Especially when like the 49ers were like getting like flags for open palm slapping players. So like it's a weird thing for people to latch onto when I think they're fishing for something to latch onto about the Chiefs in this Super Bowl. But yeah, no, the Chiefs won, bud.
I thought I could tip the
I kind of wish I had thrown out an alternate bet there for you, but
No, I mean, I didn't put any money on the game. It was just fun to say at the end of it. And it's an easy way for us to transition into the Super Bowl, which there's something more us-themed to discuss. Well, there's two us-themed things. Say Report branded things that happened during the Super Bowl. I'd prefer to start with the more upsetting one.
Sure, yeah. I'm stuck on the sports kids channels like stuff that's been going on. I don't know, man. So I watched a lot of this on Nickelodeon. So like I was too busy kind of in awe of that to actually even really be watching much of the game in that regard. So that was kind of wild. And then like I ever since then I've been getting all of these like emails and advertisements for apparently Disney is going to be hosting a Big City Greens NHL tournament that they're like getting it on. They're going to be showing like NHL games on Disney, and it's going to be hosted. And, like I don't know, like this there's like this weird move right now, and I think this is because a lot of television, the television side of like sports, right, has really kind of fallen to the wayside, right? It's losing audiences left and right. There seems to be a very big move right now to get more and more kids on board, and use these already existing channels with children to kind of bring them into it. And I don't know how I'm feeling about it, because the watching the Super Bowl on Nickelodeon was a wild experience in terms of everything I remember about like the finger wagging we have done towards these networks, towards like trying to sell things to kids and stuff like that. And it was just kind of super egregious, which is not too unusual when you think about like the Super Bowl and like the commercials and everything that goes on with that. But seeing it geared specifically towards children was pretty weird.
Yeah, I don't disagree there, but it's good. We're teaching them to be good Americans. Sorry, I was watching the slap, and it was a Chiefs player who slapped a 49er. It was Sneed who slapped Ayunik. So, I mean, that's the Chiefs still being physically abusive.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
Like I said, I wasn't really watching the game. I don't. Why are we still talking about the?
Well,
violent parts of
because
it?
you said that it was a 49er, and I'm like, oh my God, did that happen? And that's where I got caught up. I'm sorry. But then listening to what you're saying, trying to sell sports to kids and saying that people aren't watching is a really weird thesis statement that I completely agree with. On the heels of the most watched television broadcast ever happening with Super Bowl 58.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like a weird, like it worked, like everybody watched, but most people watched not because they could watch it on Nickelodeon with crazy SpongeBob and Dora themed inserts, but because of Taylor Swift. Like the conversation is, I watched the Super Bowl because Taylor Swift. Maybe I could see Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I honestly don't know a single person that watched because of Taylor Swift. I've got football and super. Here's the thing: like we have talked about this every year. I very much come from a culture, and I'm surrounded by a culture of people that we don't really watch football, but we still get together for the Super Bowl. It's like an excuse to just do something, right? You know, and that is always been the case, that people that don't normally watch football watch the Super Bowl. So I like. It's a weird thing for people to be like latching onto how the Super Bowl seemed to draw the attention of all of these non-usual, unusual viewers, or
non-usual was good. I liked that.
Non-standard.
Yeah.
But these but that's always been the case for the Super Bowl. I don't know. Because the other side of it is that somebody has done the math on the Taylor Swift stuff, and for every game that people talk about how all they seem to do is focus on Taylor Swift, there's less than 3 minutes of footage of her in like the whole like 3.5, 4 hour affair that is Sunday afternoon football, right? Like, so like I appreciate the idea that it was a meme for people to talk about watching the Super Bowl just for Taylor Swift, but I know a lot of people around me that were saying that I have seen at every Super Bowl party for the last 5 years. So like they can say that all they want, but I don't believe it, I guess.
Where I'm talking about is like younger girls and women who were watching because of Taylor Swift, which I don't know what your grouping is out there. I don't run into a run with a bunch of them, right? I don't have friends who have like teenaged daughters yet. So it's like hearing about 14-year-olds saying, we got to make sure you watch the Super Bowl, Dad, for Taylor Swift. And like,
did you hear that?
I did hear that from people yeah, I ran into a couple of people who said that.
And again, I come from a culture where even the 14-year-old girls out here, like, they still watch the Super Bowl because it's the day for everybody. I mean, It's basically like a Christmas out here. Like,
it's a Christmas kind of everywhere. It's weird that it's
right. That's what I'm saying. Is like this is kind of a thing that we've always done as a culture, and people getting really weirded out by it this year is kind of a fascinating like view. Like this, the amount of people that want to say basically gatekeep like quote unquote fandom for football right now is buck wild. Like we're talking about a sport that we have celebrated for years, the idea that anybody can watch. We literally have like movies made about like girls wanting to play football and like being interested in football. And now we finally have this moment where like all of these people are actually like, engaging and coming on board. And all you hear are all of these people that want to tell them that they can't be there because the only reason they're there, quote unquote, is Taylor Swift, which I, again, don't even really agree is the case.
Yeah.
I honestly just think there are a lot of people that were just legitimately interested in watching this game. Even if they heard about it through Taylor Swift, I don't think anybody watched this going, they need to be showing more Taylor Swift. I don't think anybody was watching expecting this to be like a Taylor Swift concert or anything like that. Like, it's just it's shitty commentary, and it's really alienating a lot of people that are legitimately trying to get interested in the sport. And it's only going to bite this entire community in the ass if they let those voices keep being the loudest voices.
I agree. And this isn't even one of the things that I wanted to talk about that I thought was like a positive or a negative. I think that people watching, I think Nick and the way that it like was able to take over social media for the game was excellent. That's all good. The negative that I wanted to talk about, not even unrelated to this, is that friggin' Hollywood broke the system. They figured out the way to like save money while marketing during the Super Bowl. And they freaking succeeded. Like, it worked. And I think that's what bothers me more. Because the idea of, instead of buying a 3-minute ad at $8 million for every 30 seconds, so then what's that, $480 million, they bought a bunch of half-hour ads that then said, see the full trailer on YouTube now.
Half minute ads?
Yeah. No, like, yeah, 30-second ads. Yeah, half minutes. Yeah. So the $8 million instead of $480 million.
Just, half an hour ad would be a very different price. Yeah,
very different, yes. I can do the math. And also I said $480 million. It's $48 million. And that sucks, right? Because of the ads that I watched the Super Bowl for, it is one of the only nights where I'm completely okay watching trailers, because I'm going to forget about everything that I just saw once the football starts up again. It's the same reason why I'm okay watching trailers in the movie theater, because after those trailers, I'm going to be watching a 90 to 180 minute long film that's going to erase everything and anything I saw in those trailers. I'm okay with it. But then 30-second teaser directing me to YouTube, that is frustrating. Because they don't really have any time to show anything, and then I want to go watch it on YouTube. Specifically for something like Deadpool and Wolverine, which I was one of those 365 million views. Or whatever ridiculous YouTube record they set with people who viewed the Deadpool Wolverine trailer in the first 24 hours.
Yeah. So this is not actually like really that new, because they've done the extended trailer available online thing for years, and actually more and more like the whole
like
they've
Red
always
Band.
had to do the whole they've always had to do the online aspect anyway, right? And then so what they did is they took this advantage, they took advantage of this whole thing where they were like, people are going to go and watch the trailer online anyway, then let's just direct them there and not spend that much for during the Super Bowl. And like, I guess you can call that breaking the system, but at the end of the day, ABC still got their ducats. There was not a moment that there was not an ad. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
they didn't break it in any way that hurt anybody on that side. And then on this side of things, we always ended up watching the trailers online anyway. Hell, half the commercials for 10 years now we've basically, like, yes, we've had the Super Bowl on, but then we've spent more time just going online and rewatching the commercials than we did actually watching the game. Even this Super Bowl, like, yeah, some of it was the movie trailer stuff. We got pushed there because of that, but some of it was also just wanting to rewatch certain ones. People that were like, wait a minute, I missed the really wild like Office reference in that one commercial. Can we rewatch it? And we would go online and find it and watch it. Like, especially with the ability to like pause the game and things like that. People going online to rewatch this stuff is something that was already kind of happening. So really, the only thing that happened that was any different this year was just these movie companies going, why are we wasting all of this time with all of this money to put a preview on during the Super Bowl that everybody is going to end up going to watch online anyway? And then, as you just pointed out, it actually ended up helping them, because then they ended up getting more eyes on it online, which gives you a better idea of viewer count.
True.
Right? Like, assuming anybody watching the Super Bowl, it's such a weird like toss-up what that means for viewer count, because so many people are at parties, so many people are at bars, so many people are in these places, so they can say, we know this went out to so many different TVs, but we don't know how many eyes were on those TVs. We don't know if anybody was in the room while it played. We don't know any of this. Whereas a viewership number on YouTube is pretty specific. The odds of somebody clicking play on that thing and then walking away are pretty much none. And you could kind of assume that you don't have like 20 people standing around a TV, 20 people standing around a computer screen. Although you might, depending on where YouTube is being viewed. So like that gets a little squishy again, but not nearly as bad as just the assumptions you have to make with Nielsen ratings and shit like that.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It just, like, you're not wrong. It's a thing, and it just was kind of disappointing to see that Hollywood caught up with it. Because it was nice to be like, oh, I saw this trailer, and then discuss the trailer.
But again, I remember like the big thing the last few years has been that they showed like a 2 minute long preview during the Super Bowl, but then there was like the 3.5 or 5 minute long one, or the Red Band trailer. Like, right, go check out the Red Band trailer for Expendables 2 or some shit like that. Like they've always done internet exclusive. We want to get
Content,
reviews there, like things in the past. All they did this time was they just spent just a little less time on the TV spot, and I don't know. That is what it is.
So I guess my complaint is very
the artistic choices of commercial. Like,
I mean, my complaint is very like localized. It's a me problem because I would not go watch that extended thing. I'd like have my cup filled with that 2 minute spot that happened, and it felt exciting. But then when it's only 30 seconds and really not much more than, say, the actor or the title of the movie, maybe a release date, I'm not as satisfied. And I mean, I'm not going to go online. I'm not going to be that person. I did it for Wolverine Deadpool. I'll admit that. I also did it later. I didn't do it during the game. But it was just one of those things where like Hollywood caught on to it, because you're not wrong. Every other company has these long extended commercials that are online, and then they put a truncated version and abridged version during the Super Bowl so that they don't spend the entire year's marketing budget on one ad. They only spend like 75% of it. And I get that. And then one of those we're going to talk about, we're going to celebrate. The friggin' title of the episode is inspired by it. The DUNKINGS episode. I'm drinking my DUNKINGS iced coffee right now, as eagle-eared listeners will know from the intro before the song. And that commercial, like the one that played during the Super Bowl, was fine. And then Sejohn, you sent me the 5-minute should be entered into the short film competition at the Oscars. Right? Like they're just leaving money on the table if they don't try to get it for their consideration. Right?
No, but yeah, even Dunkin' Donuts has the, you can watch the extended commercial online like tag at the end of their commercial, and I did, and I found it, and I sent it to you.
Yes, and I sent it to other people who were asking for it, and then was like, it's 5 minutes long, and I'm like, that's the link that I have. I don't have the one that aired during the Super Bowl. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to send you the long one, but you asked about the Dunkin' commercial, and the Dunkin' commercial was excellent. And for me, and again, in the Say Report backyard, because of Ben Affleck, because of Matt Damon, a little bit of Tom Brady in there.
J-Lo,
right?
There was a lot going on.
The Geely. No, they've done other things together. But, it's fun to call it the Geely reunion we were all waiting for. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed the Super Bowl. I didn't really enjoy the football. And that's like, it ended up being an exciting game at the end, but during the game, I don't think anything big or miraculous or spectacular really happened. The best thing is that I got in the grid, the Decker family got in the grid, that the scores will end in 2-5. And honestly, I felt real pissed off about that, because it's rare to have a score end in a 2 or a 5 in a game where primarily you're awarded 3s and 6s for good play. But then because of overtime and then not having to go for an extra point after the fact, I walked away with some money in a Super Bowl pool. That was fun. 2-5, man. 22-25? That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't much of a game for the first half, and then the second half they suddenly started playing again, and so that was definitely worth watching. And yeah, I don't know, I like I said, the Super Bowl is not really like a thing where like we're invested in the game. Like the game is fun and it's great to follow along and gives you something to do during that time. But it's more of an excuse out here for food and hangouts and games and and family stuff and all that sort of thing. So like having the Nickelodeon feed was wild because there was something sillier to watch, right? Like, and for us to do that. Meanwhile, we had the bigger TV that had the normal feed on. That's where we were getting all the commercials and things like that. And like, it just became kind of just this big, kind of hangout bash. And I think the biggest thing is this was also kind of the first one that we've been able to do since COVID.
Yeah.
Because
I
the
get
last
that.
couple of years, even though things have quote unquote gotten better and everybody out here has gotten vaccines, or at least everybody in our circles has gotten vaccines and boosters, there was always still this kind of air of like, around this time of year, we still want to really be careful, between Christmas travel and Thanksgiving travel and then Super Bowl travel. Like, there's a lot of people getting together, and it doesn't matter how many vaccines y'all got. Like, if one thing goes wrong, everybody still ends up with COVID. It might not be as bad as it would be otherwise, but it still sucks, right? So like, we've still been watching ourselves, and this was kind of the first year where I think we all really kind of did just go, okay, this feels safe. We know everybody there is going to be up to snuff with all of that sort of stuff, and everybody, we even had somebody that had been concerned about COVID, but they had 2 negative tests before they came over, so that felt okay to us, like that kind of thing. And yeah, so like I think that's also the other part of it is this was also the first one in a long time that people felt like cool about. So like there's so many factors for making this such a largely watched Super Bowl, and all of that shit's going unnoticed with a bunch of people that want to just like be weird about the Taylor Swift stuff, and then like all of the stuff that people are trying to make out of the Chiefs. I think the big thing that's really rubbing me the wrong way about all of the stuff with the Chiefs is that there was also this huge kind of move with some of the Taylor Swift stuff and all that like the Chiefs somehow didn't deserve to be there with some of the attitudes people were giving. There was all this stuff about like the conspiracy theory of like the government trying to get the Chiefs in there so that Taylor Swift, who's obviously a op from the CIA, can be in front of millions, like all of that nonsense that's been kind of going around. Mostly memes, although I think that people are kind of ignoring some of the scary amounts of truth some people seem to find in that bullshit. But that like that whole attitude just stunk of like the Chiefs shouldn't be there. They were just kind of let in. And like that really ignores the fact that they've been in five out of the last 6 Super Bowls or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Including this not being like their only win. Right? Like,
Yeah, they're a dynasty. They
yeah,
literally
yeah.
did the same exact trajectory as the New England Patriots 20 years ago.
And I
Because they
remember there
won,
being,
they
like,
lost
weird
the
stuff
Buccaneers, and then they won again. Like, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
and I feel there being like something weird back then too. This idea that even after the Patriots invented the Super Bowl like 4 or 5 times, people just being like, "Oh, they just want to try and get the Patriots in because it's America," and it's like, or because the team has done really good, which they prove to you on the fields every week, right? Like, so like this whole season has had this weird attitude about it with the Chiefs, and seeing that just kind of bleed into the Super Bowl stuff online again, not even in my day to day, like the people I interact with on a regular basis about this sort of stuff, all of them find it to just be the weirdest thing. And like I'm just getting kind of sick of not being able to look outside of my bubble and not see fucking nonsense, because I recognize that it's also a bubble. Like, part of me also wanted to like see what some friends of mine were up to that were not football fans, that don't do the Super Bowl stuff, like what they were doing that day, because there's some other stuff going around right now, certain movies out and things like that like I'm wondering what people are up to, and I couldn't even like sort through the shit to see what some of them were doing, and that was kind of a bummer too, because they also kind of were being inundated with a bunch of nonsense about the Super Bowl that they felt they had to respond to and things. And pro tip, kids, you don't have to engage if you don't want to. Like, social media makes us feel like we all have to engage with whatever the thing is at the moment, and like the people that don't often find themselves either alienated, or like people like to act like, oh, like they're somehow being better than everybody else. Don't take that shit. You don't have to interact with it if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Don't let the FOMO get to you.
Agreed. And then the final thing on the Super Bowl, and then we can move past it, is despite it having record viewership numbers at home, it was the least attended Super Bowl that did not happen during the pandemic. So, like, as much as things are getting better and people are partying at home again and everything like that, Like, I don't know if it was fear of that or if it's just the cost is now. I mean, it's always been kind of prohibitive.
Well,
But
especially with it being in Vegas for the first time this
yeah,
year, right? Like, there's something to be said about that too.
yeah, there's a lot of factors going into it. Like in the middle of the desert, and people don't want to go there. And I know that Vegas was like trying to rebrand itself as a family destination 20 years ago, but still, I mean, it's one of those weird things where like you don't really see kids at the Super Bowl.
Well, when the cheapest ticket is $10,000, right? Like,
Yeah.
not that like kids should not be involved in sports, but if I had kids, I don't know if I'd be spending 10 grand on them to go to the Super Bowl when we have the option of watching
You get it
it
at home.
from our home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of it's that I do think there's something to be said about the idea that Vegas is not necessarily known for being like the most family, like, the idea that if it happened in the middle of, say, Chicago, right? I also can think of like 5 different suburbs that like I could go and find like friends or family in that, maybe it's an hour away, but it's the Super Bowl, so I'll stay with them and then drive the hour to go to the Super Bowl. I don't know if that exists for Vegas outside of the city. I don't know where else you stay. You know what I mean? I don't know what other places there are. Like, I don't know what satellite areas there are that can house people and take care of people in a way that like you can in some of these other major cities. Like, yeah, and I middle of the desert was no joke. Like, there is not much to fucking do out here at all.
Yeah. It's so yeah, so it was that was a strange dichotomy there to see that like everybody watched it but nobody really attended it. And also the cost of a ticket is no joke. Like Affirm, I don't know if you're aware of the company Affirm that's like buy stuff and then pay it off slowly over time, and it's like, so you've just rebranded credit cards. That's all you seem to have done. Affirm was like,
yeah, or bank loans.
Yeah.
Like very specific loans. Yeah.
Like but then I got one that's like buy your Super Bowl tickets with Affirm, and I'm like, wow, that is predatory. Like right there, that feels very much like Affirm is on the offensive. I don't know. I mean, I would never do that, but and they've helped me out with like I got like my work phone on it, and that was helpful. But I don't know if I would buy Super Bowl tickets on an Affirm loan. That seems like a bridge too far.
Affirm loan. That shit is.
Yeah.
And, yeah. When you're not backed by a major bank and you're offering that kind, or by a government supported bank, I don't know, maybe a firm has more going on behind it than I know, but it strikes me as like those ones that you hear about on like podcasts all the time that are always just like, yeah, and these are loans supported by the community. We don't have any government interference to tell you what you can or can't do with your money. And it's just like, oh, so you mean the exact kind of thing that has no structure to it if a bunch of people decide they never want to pay back or something like that. Literally what we saw in 2008.
Yeah. Which is a great time for us to pause for this week's sponsor. No, I kid. Of course I kid. But yeah, so that was weird. That was the Super Bowl. That was the thing that happened in the last week. Literally, we finished recording, and then I think Super Bowl festivities went into effect for everybody. Not here. Here we watched Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. No longer part 1. They've dropped the part 1. But it's weird because they don't change the movie to not be called Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. I don't get it, Sejohn. I don't understand that.
Don't what?
Why they dropped the Part 1 after it's released on video? They're still doing the second movie, right? By all accounts, isn't the second movie made?
So from what I understand, it was not finished.
Okay, that's
it was
good.
mostly finished. In that there's a lot of discussions about how there may be some changes coming. Like nobody has verified that. Reshoots always happen on movies, so sometimes you can't tell if what's happening is just them just doing the normal stuff or if they are legitimately making some changes. But the rumblings are supposedly with the name changes also because again, the timing is all fucked because they were supposed to come out only a year apart from each other or something like that, right? Or 2 years at the most.
But they were supposed to have both released by now.
Yeah,
Like
one was
that.
supposed to be 2022 and the other was supposed to be 2023. Wasn't
Yeah.
that the
Yes.
yeah, something like that. But there was supposed to be such little time between them that there wasn't supposed to be a question. These are the same movie, but we didn't want you to sit through a 5-hour experience. We broke them up, blah blah blah. Also, we get you to pay twice for the same thing. But anyway, whatever conversations you want to have about that. The problem is now is that we are staring at the possibility of we got this movie in what ended up being 2023, correct?
Uh-huh.
And then we're not going to see this next one until 2025 at the earliest.
That is
And that is
correct.
not even a guarantee. So like there's this attitude that that maybe they need to do something to make that movie a little bit maybe heftier and rounder and fuller as a film. I think is and again, this is not anybody from the movie saying that, because anybody involved with the film is being extremely hush hush about what's going on with it. And why wouldn't you be? Like, everything seems to be very up in the air and very weird right now, and anything you say out there gets set in stone, and you don't want to tie yourself down to any of that, depending on what happens. So this isn't coming from anybody directly from the film. This is not like Tom Cruise out there saying this. This is just kind of what everybody's assuming must be going on now, because they've taken this extra time. They have done some pretty significant continued shoots or reshoots. Again, we don't know what they are, and on top of all of that, they renamed the movie, so, the first movie. So like, I I'm leaning towards them probably putting a little bit more in the next one than they intended to. Um, but that being said, I don't know why you need to. I think that people are pretty on board with this kind of thing nowadays.
I gotta say, I will say this. Having seen it now, they didn't need the part one thing of it. As opposed to something like, what, Across the Spider-Verse? Was that the second one? Yeah. Enter the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, Beyond the Spider-Verse. Is that what the three of them are? The middle
Yeah.
one. That movie legitimately felt like it ended on a cliffhanger. Here's the middle of the movie. Peace out. I didn't see Fast X, but I know that it's another one that like ended on sort of a to be finished in the next movie.
Right.
Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, even though it ends with like the big main conflict unresolved, did not feel like it was not a complete story. And that's what I liked the most about it.
Yeah.
Also, it's almost 3 hours long, and it flew by for me. I had no idea that 3 hours had gone by when it ended. That movie is good. I have to say it, because if I saw it and I hated it, I would probably be like, I friggin' hated it. Looking at you, Mission Impossible 2. So to watch Mission Impossible 7, the first Mission Impossible I have watched at home since 5 and 6 went out, right? I guess that's going to be my whole thing. I'll see the first 2 in theaters, then 2 at home, then 2 in theaters. I'm a little disappointed because it means I can't see the 8th one in theater, but it's worked out so far, Sejohn. I cannot question my own wayward way of watching these films. But I was really impressed by it.
Yeah,
In terms of
so I was getting more of like an Endgame vibe, like, what is it, Infinity War Endgame vibe,
yeah, exactly.
right? Like that idea that like there are people out there that will tell you that you don't need to watch Endgame, just watch Infinity War because of their feelings on Endgame. And some fewer people, but definitely out there, vice versa. But then there's me. Like I just enjoy the full story. So like I always love the idea of the two of them together. But like I could recognize that there is a full movie in Infinity War, right? Just
Yes.
to use the $1 billion movie out there. Or the actually, even I think an even better example of all of this is all of the Lord of the Rings films. There isn't a single person out there that felt like that couldn't kind of keep up. You know what I mean? There was definitely those moments where people were like, "Oh, I need to rewatch the first ones before I go and see this one because I want to make sure I know what's going on." But nobody out there was like, "You need to wrap this up quicker. I can't follow this story." I don't know. It's a wild concept to say, "Hey, we're gonna make these two movies in tandem, or at least one directly right after the other, because they feel so connected," and then not getting the ability to do that, and then suddenly feeling like you need to go on like the defensive and like do a bunch of stuff to protect those movies, like like not make any comments to the public, but also relabel the first one and all of this stuff. And it's like, calm down, guys. Just make your movies. We'll watch them and we'll judge them based on what you did. Like I don't see the benefits or or the negatives. Like I don't see any real needle movement in like changing the name or being hush hush about what's going on with the sequel or any of that. I don't understand what it is they're afraid is happening. Like I don't understand it because and to your point, like I don't understand it because from what I understand, it's also just really good. Like a lot of people are very on board with it. So like this weird this weird move to like shift a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes for this series of movies that has a pretty well built-in audience is wild to me.
That's the other crazy thing, right? Like these movies have existed for 20 years.
Hmm.
They've almost 20, almost 25, almost 30 years, right? In 2 years, the Mission Impossible franchise will be 30 years old.
Yeah, the first one's 1996, right?
Yeah, so you don't need to worry about it. People who are seeing these movies are seeing these movies. I remember the discussion about, like, I couldn't remember the name of the sixth movie while we were watching the seventh movie. And then they're like, no, this is the sixth movie. And I'm like, no, there's a movie that happened between Rogue Nation, which I think, God, Rogue Nation was such a good movie. And I understand how that kind of eclipsed Fallout a little bit. It's Fallout, by the way. And I mean, like, that just sometimes happens. But, like, there are still people, everybody in this house was like, yeah, let's watch the next Mission Impossible movie. I don't know.
I'm very curious to see what happens with the next one, but like this whole mysterious oeuvre around everything going on with like the naming and the story stuff is interesting to watch because I don't think anybody actually cares except for the people making the movie.
Right, which is kind of insane. You're not wrong about that. Because I don't care. I think the only thing that it affected for me with them changing the movie is that I went out and bought a copy of the film because it was released physically as part one, and I'm like, I want that box that says that before they do like a reprinting that is just dead reckoning.
Yeah. Before they live, die, repeat this.
Exactly. Yeah. Which, I mean, this is totally being live, died, repeated because it's Tom Cruise. So it's got to be him. He has to be the one in the driver's seat. Like, we got to change the name. People are going to wonder. No one's going to wonder.
There's not very many actors that I would give that to you. Like, the amount of power people want to give Dwayne Johnson in the world, like, really confuddles me sometimes. Like, when they're like, he just walks in the room and tells the movie studios what to do, and they just bow to him. And I'm like, I don't think that's how it works at all. But, okay. Tom Cruise, though, I'll give it to you. If Tom Cruise were the one saying, no, we need to relabel this, somebody at Paramount would be like, well, if Mr. Cruise wants to, we got to do what Mr. Cruise says, right? Right? Yeah, let's do this, okay?
But also, I mean, that's the reason why I say that is that, like, doesn't he own Skydance in some way? Isn't he part of the Skydance production company?
I mean, at least for the Mission Impossible movies, I know that he's a huge like financial investment and producer and all and creative head like in all of that. So you may be right about Skydance, but I know that 100% that's true with the Mission Impossible movies.
Yeah. TC Productions is the name of his production company. Thank you so much for that, Tom Cruise. I wonder what the T and the C stand for. Is Tom and Cruise, in case anyone's not following what I'm doing. Yeah, in fact, if you go to TC Productions on Wikipedia, it redirects to Tom Cruise's Wikipedia page.
Yeah. Like I said, I wasn't sure about the Skydance stuff, but I know for a fact, like, he is definitely that kind of person when it comes to the Mission Impossible films.
Yeah.
So, like, again, there are very few people I will give you that story, right? Like that legend of like they come in and they just get to kind of snap their fingers and the world bows to them when it comes to that shit. But of anybody out there making movies right now, Tom Cruise is definitely probably one of those people.
Isn't it wild and wacky that the two people who I could definitely point to who have that a level of power are Tom Cruise and Adam Sandler? Like just think about it. I don't know. But yeah, so that's what we did before the Super Bowl, and that was a lot of fun. Also, one other thing. I finished the short message. It is only 3 chapters. I basically got to the start of the 3rd chapter and was like, I'm bored. And then we also had to record. So I finished it, and I don't know. I mean, it just wasn't for me at the end of it after having gone through it. I will say that the 3rd chapter was the one that felt the most like a video game and felt the most like I'm solving puzzles. But it doesn't really change my feelings on a new Silent Hill game, which is what I would think the goal behind something like that would be, right?
Yeah, I
It's
don't know.
marketing. I don't.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, like the reception of both that one and the previews for the Silent Hill 2 remake
Yeah,
have really got that whole community in a bit of a tizzy because on the one hand, they always want that series to keep going, but they never seem happy with the directions it's going in. So I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people still feel very burned by PT and what the loss of PT and the loss of everything going on with Guillermo and all that sort of stuff. And it's hard to talk about that all that stuff with Kojima being gone. There's so many burned bridges with that series that I don't. They'd have to make a hell of a game in order to rebuild them,
yeah,
and I just don't think either of these is it. This short demo that they've got here or tech demo of for like because that's the big thing about short message that we didn't really talk about, but like the new Unreal Engine aspects to that, right? And like the new that was kind of the bigger thing about short message, I think, that a lot of people really aren't even focused on, which is a shame. But like the ways in which it uses FMV and the ways in which it uses like really good like motion capture stuff and brings you into those first person moments and all that stuff too. Like that shit's all really impressive, I think. No matter what you feel about the gameplay of the game, like it looks really good. And I think that's what they were kind of hoping more people would talk about. And nobody's really focused on that because as good as it looks, it's like Silent Hill is finally making games like people make games around us now, you know?
yeah. Like, why is everybody focused on the story? They should be focused on the graphics. I mean, the fact that there is full motion video that just like happens is pretty cool. Like, there's no loading into any of those, or if it is masked exceedingly well. But then, because there's full motion video, when it is like an in-game cinematic, it does not look good at all.
Interesting.
Like, that is, like, there was one that I'm just like, oh, this is stuttering, and that's very strange. Or, if they did it in this, like, slow motion way, it is just distracting. Thinking specifically of the final cinematic, where the girl, like, finally lifts the fog of Silent Hill. And I gotta say that I did like that. It was very Rogue One for me, where like the short message was created, as a way to like bridge the gap between Silent Hill the place and Silent Hill all of the other games. Because like one of the last files you find is that a fog descends upon any of the areas where like the suicide rates are going up or people are finding themselves exceedingly depressed, and they've called it the Silent Hill phenomenon.
Yeah, they kind of pull a Bioshock Infinite and be like, "There's always a lighthouse. There's always a fog. There's always a yeah." It's a little weird that like they choose to do that, but also because I feel like it's one of those things that we already kind of all were already on board for, and they feel this need to like justify a thing that everybody is kind of already okay
Already
with.
on
Like, you
board,
don't need yeah. You're like, no, we get it, guys. Right? Silent Hill is no longer a place. It's a state of mind. That's been the case for the last 6 games. Like,
The Silent Hill phenomenon, named after the eponymous town in America where the phenomenon was first noticed.
right?
Okay,
Right.
cool. Thank you for that. I honestly think we were all there, but I guess it's cool that you like stamped your name on it. Like, this is what's happening. No discussion.
Like one of the biggest things about short message for me that I like is the way that they latch onto how the horror really does build from the individual. Like Resident Evil is a very outward in situation. You end up with normal people in very weird places having to deal with them, and as normal as they are, they're superheroes in and of themselves. But like this idea that like the reason everybody latches onto Leon Kennedy specifically is because he's this scrawny little dude with like a bowl cut that finds himself like dropped off in Raccoon City the night of the turn, as it were, and like has to survive and get out. And it's always about like these survivors, right? And the best Silent Hill games are the ones that really take the individual character and building on their shit create the worlds around them. Whatever the tortures are, whatever the monsters are, whatever they all come from something that's very personal to them. So like you or I see the cherry blossom monster and it's just weird. And it doesn't quite make sense and all of this stuff, right? But to the individual in that game, to the character in that game, that concept is horrific, right? And
Yeah.
like that I really dig that. I really like that. That the ways in which the short message really does lean into that story of the individual, and everything kind of comes from that person's fears and anxieties and that sort of stuff. So like I like it in that regard and think it really succeeds in that regard. But beyond that, I like I think that it's really good that it's like a small package. I think for like a 90-minute small package game that really kind of gets into some very baseline Silent Hill stuff, it does great. I can't really judge it much beyond that. I don't think it has much sticking power for more than that. So I don't know if they're hoping that it's going to be some type of demo for a larger thing, or if there's some other concepts that they want to pull from it. I don't know. I don't know where it goes. And then as far as the Silent Hill 2 stuff goes, people reacting to previews when the game's not even out, I kind of always rubs me the wrong way. But there is definitely some stuff in those previews that look a little shady, but Silent Hill 2 is also just really good in that regard because of everything that I said about Silent Hill and like the ways in which it really digs into the main character's like ethos in order to really create its scares, and that works for me. It just works really well.
Yeah, and I think that's where the biggest misstep for the short message, where I'm coming from, is that I don't feel I got to know enough of the main character and like her little neuroses before being plunged into how her feelings manifested horrors for her. There was
Yeah.
like a disconnect between her fears and how those fears would affect me, because it's only a 90-minute package, you can only do so much with the storytelling.
Yeah.
And I really hope that, because even something like you talk about Leon Kennedy and stuff like that, they do a really good job to make both him and Claire feel like they are isolated and against the world in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
when you finally run into a human being in Resident Evil 2, it's meaningful because of all the isolation that you have faced leading up to that point.
Right.
And it's cool. Like that's a cool thing. But short message, it's like, oh, okay, so I see how this is connected and how she's afraid of it, but it's like I see it, I don't feel it. I don't feel that same connection. And I don't know, because you're not wrong. The beauty of Silent Hill, the reason why The Room is the one that I always cite, again, it's not one that I've ever played. I've never played a Silent Hill. Short Message was my first one. But The Room and the idea of like you are trapped in this room and it is changing and modifying itself and leading to other places based upon who you are in this room is very cool. It's very Evil Dead 2 to be just a total asshole about it. But like the fear of Evil Dead 2 is a lot of inward stuff from Ash, and I feel more connected to that because of what Raimi is doing in that movie.
Yeah, well, and you know, again, it's like it's kind of like the juxtaposition of what Resident Evil is doing.
Yeah.
Resident Evil is doing outward in. Resident Evil is always saying like you are the hero, these are the monsters, all of that. Whereas like Silent Hill has always been, I mean, the twist of every Silent Hill game, surprise, surprise, like spoiler alert for everybody, but the twist is always you're the monster, right? Like those games are always about you inevitably finding out what you or the character you're playing as, at least, what they have actually done that makes them the worst, right? And so the secret at the end of all of those games is usually that you are the worst monster in this world. And like from that, like all this other stuff, you know, comes to fruition, comes to life. What, you know, whether that's true or if it's just in the character's head, we don't really know. And like all of that sort of stuff, like that's what that whole series plays on. And I think it's a little bit of a harder line to walk in terms of success, just because like it can get really hokey if and it can be really hard for, as you pointed out, for the audience to connect in that way. Resident Evil, that bridge is not that far, right? That idea of connecting to somebody who is stuck in a situation that they don't understand, and so it's scary, is an easier place for me to get to because I don't understand. I've only just shown up in this video game as well, so I am also scared because I don't know what's going on. Boom. But like you're pointing out, when you're doing this like psychological horror where it has to be so built from the character that the person's playing as, you really need to do your due diligence to bring the audience up to speed with where that character is for any of it to matter. And yeah, I think that the short play time is definitely going to be a huge thing working against you. Although there are plenty of other little psychological indie horrors out there that hit the 90 to 2 hour mark that seem to get people just fine. You know, I pointed once when we were talking last week about it to Amnesia and those games oh man, the Amnesia guys just had one last year that was really good that came out where you were like a guy in a trench. It might have even just been Amnesia 2. I got to look that up later because that would hit really well. But Amnesia is a perfect example of a series that you can play for 6 to 10 hours, but most people usually try and get through that in like 2 to 3. And like people, have meaningful experiences with that game. So like I don't think the short length is enough to give it a pass in that regard, if that makes any sense.
They think that they tried their hardest to do it. It's just maybe it's just that it's too weird. Like, and that's really feels like I'm making sort of an excuse for it, but like, cause it does give you all of this information that like kind of fuels it, but it all seems like strangely disconnected. The second chapter feels like it doesn't really have any bearing on the first and third. Like I was very like the second chapter was one where I'm like, all right, kind of getting this, but then I'm like, but none of this matters, right? None of this is attached or connected to like the grander thing, because they explore her friend Amelie a lot in the second chapter of the short message, and I'm like, this is really cool stuff showing that like her life isn't perfect. These are the things that are going on in her life, and then it's like, but all of that is ultimately kind of erased in the end of it. Like it doesn't have a bearing.
Yeah, no, I think that, yeah, like I said, I don't think you can just say that, oh, it's short, so it didn't have a chance to do what it needed to do, because there are other games that are short that can succeed in that regard. I think it really is a matter of them doing too much and not doing any one thing particularly well, like, or not even that, like they really needed to knock it out of the park. Like, unfortunately, it's that situation we find ourselves in with everything nowadays, where if it's not the best thing you've ever seen, then it's not worth talking about, right?
Yeah.
And like, unfortunately, Silent Hill, if it wants to come back as Silent Hill, that's what they need, because they're not gonna bring anybody new on, I think, with this kind of stuff. It doesn't seem to be pleasing old fans. So, I mean, their only option at this point is they've got to put something out there that's just a fucking banger, so that they can get people back on board and get that kind of leeway, so that they can get back to trying their weirder shit again. But until they can get like some success with this, they're just not going to be given the opportunity to. And that's unfortunate, but like that's how this stuff works, right? Like we don't let the stuff that isn't fun or successful, that shit doesn't get to keep going. I mean, that's
how it goes. I want to talk about something that I did this week, Sejohn, and that I've been joking that it changed my life. It didn't change my life, but I really enjoyed it. I had a good time, and that's Madam Web. I mean, did you get a chance to see Madam Web? I doubt it, but if you did, that'd be cool.
Given a chance and did I take the chance are two different questions, Devon. I had plenty of chances to go see Madam Web, especially since it's been out since Wednesday.
Yeah.
So, Web's Day. No, I did not see Madam Web, and I mean, all cards on the table. I don't think this is going to be revelatory for anybody, but I don't think I'm going to see it. I mean, I did mention when we had kind of a larger conversation about it a few months back, that maybe I would take the opportunity to take the chance because of my initial negative feelings were not fair as the movie was not out yet. But now that the movie's out and it seems like my worst concerns have come to pass, I don't really think I need to go see it. But, maybe. I tried with Morbius. That didn't quite work. And I have seen Venom and I liked Venom. So, like, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to make a concerted effort to see Madam Web. If something comes up and it's in front of me, I won't walk away, but I'm not going to make the effort to put it in front of my eyeballs, I don't think.
That's fine. That's completely fair. That's all I wanted to confirm. I'd really like to talk about Madam Web. I know that
Yeah,
sometimes
no,
we give a
let's
little
do
bit of
this.
time, but
No,
like,
I am very excited to listen to you talk about Madam Web, considering what the rest of the world has been saying about it. I would love to hear somebody who saw that movie pull a few things from it that they actually enjoyed.
wow. All right, so right now, spoilers for Madam Web. You have until the 55-minute mark to get out of here, because that's when I'm talking about Madam Web. So you got
You
10
can't say
seconds
wow,
to
Dev.
run.
You can't be surprised that at that like view on it, considering that like it's literally making records for how low of ratings it has on Rotten Tomatoes and things like that.
I can act however I want to act about it. It's Madam Web time. It's spoiler in time. What does Ben Grimm say? What does the thing say?
It's
It's
clobbering
clobbering time. Yeah, it's spoiler in time. Thank you. Clobbering time was in my head. I've also been thinking about the Fantastic Four with the announcement of the cast, and I think I'm done with the Fantastic Four. But that's just the me thing. We can talk about that later, especially with one other thing that I want to address this week. But it's time for Madam Web. And now here is the thing about Madam Web that I need to start with. Are you aware of what the original plot line of Madam Web was going to be? Have you stumbled across it on the internet?
I mean, I had always understood it that this was going to be somewhat of a prequel movie for them to start laying down some stuff that's been kind of supposedly in the background of other Sony shit. But essentially, at the end of the day, Madam Web, who has the ability to see the future, saw that these two people were going to have an important child and they protect these two people, those two people being the Parker parents. That was basically everything that I knew about this movie up until it came out. I haven't seen anything to discredit that, but to be honest, that's because I haven't seen anybody actually talk about anything in this movie other than that they couldn't keep watching this movie.
Actually, before we go any further, a really interesting thing about Madam Web is that despite having been out for like 3 or 4 days, the Wikipedia page was still blank when it came to the plot and synopsis. Let's see, Madam Web film. It has since been filled out, so I will say that. And you are not wrong. The original plan for this was that Richard and Mary Parker were going to have a child, and it was going to be up to Cassandra Webb with 2 B's to protect that child, along with the help of Julia Carpenter, in this movie now Julia Cornwall, Martha Maddie Franklin, and I was convinced that the third one was Jessica Drew, but it's actually Anya Corazon, who was a Spider Girl. She's a very famous Spider Girl, and then she went by Las Arañas for a really long time before eventually becoming a Spider Woman. And that's played by Isabella Moner, who is now going by Isabella Merced. I don't know why she has changed her name in Hollywood. I can't find that she was married or anything like that. But that's Dora from Dora and the Lost City. Had no idea that it was Dora who was going to be in this movie. All of my excitement for this movie came from the fact that it was very, very reminiscent to me of the first issue of Spider-Woman's 3rd volume from 1999. I was wrong. I will admit that right now. That is not the case at all. I will also confirm for everybody out there that it is true. The 3 Spider-Women who are in this movie are only ever seen as Spider-Woman and with powers in a very powerful dream sequence. That's a real thing that happens.
Yeah, and so just to kind of get to. So we never really talked about this before because it was not out. It wasn't confirmed that this is what the story was. But with that being the concept for the story, hence where a lot of my feelings about how I don't know how they're supposed to be telling this story. And as far as I understood it, not really having the ability to get too deep into Spider-Man, like when that was supposed to be the story of this movie. And again, I have not heard anybody say hide nor hair about what the movie's actually about now and whether or not they succeed in talking about Spider-Man or not talking about Spider-Man or any of that. But all of this conversations that we had about how like I'm very curious to see what this movie is once it comes out, because as far as I understood it, it was supposed to literally be about them trying to what's the like gift of the Magi, like like try and save the young Christ child Peter Parker.
The gift of the Magi is very different from the three wise men.
Not gift of the Magi.
Yeah.
Sorry,
the gift of the Magi is O.
nativity.
Henry.
I meant nativity. Is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I get it.
Christmas is very different than your Christmas.
Well, I mean, no, the gift of the Magi is O. Henry, and it's about irony. The nativity story and the three wise men lying to King Herod about the Christ child being born. And then in some things, they were sent to kill the Christ child, right? They're like the woodsman from Snow White, because every story is just another story.
I've never heard that in my life. That'd be a wild ass version of that story.
I think that their goal was to, I think in one version of it, their goal was to go and murder the Christ child for King Herod, and then instead they gave it gifts.
Is this like the Brothers Grimm version?
I don't. I will look it up. The three wise men.
Three wise hitmen sent to kill the Christ child. Yeah, anyway, I meant nativity when I said gift of the Magi.
Yeah, it's okay.
Misspoke. But yes, I like this idea that they are supposed to be like these ones that like shepherd in this like this spider child is essentially the way that it had been out there that the story was going to be. And what this was going to do was then in the Sony universe, like really tie together what needed to happen with the Sinister Six, in that like they were going to bring that team together. I'm assuming in my head it was going to be because of an absence of Peter. Something in this movie was going to cause it so that Peter doesn't exist in this universe, which would make more sense with everything we've seen out of both Venom and Morbius, including after credit scenes and things like that. Like the ways in which this movie was supposed to basically introduce a paradox that then the Sinister Six were going to have to come together to resolve, which was not, I will say, not entirely my thesis. This is one that has been in people's conversations for a while about what the fuck is Sony doing in a universe where they can't mention Spider-Man. This was kind of like, oh, they're going to talk about a universe where there isn't one. And like all of these pieces were lining up for a really interesting story in that regard. Now, my interest in all of that fell apart immensely as they slowly started to put out these movies that just were not doing that. So again, I have no idea what this movie actually is, but what it was supposed to be versus what it finally came out as, I think doesn't even matter now, considering the meta reception of these films.
Yeah. That's not it. I have to go back to the Bible stuff and the three wise men.
Yeah, I was giving you time to look it up.
No, I haven't. Thank you. I appreciate it. Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage, is what Herod said. So Herod kind of sent them to be like, find the Christ child and then tell me where he is, and I'm gonna not kill him. Don't worry about that. But then when they saw him and like he was the God, he was the Christ child, they went another direction and never returned to Herod. But like they were kind of like the away party to find the target so that he could murder the child.
That's fine. That's not what you said.
I said that they were sent to kill him, which is not the case, and I apologize for that. No, so everything you're saying, that's really interesting stuff. And knowing now the original script for this movie was going to be these four women coming together to ensure that Peter Parker was born.
And as I understand it, again, like some of this is me putting my own shit into the story. Some of this is like people online making guesses. But what I understood, them coming together to make sure the child is born and failing. It was supposed to be a very dark movie.
Yeah.
In that they failed at succeeding in getting Peter to appear, which was then going to lead to Sony having a Spider-Verse without Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Which would have been brilliant. But again, every movie that has come out has seemed to not be that. So like, how unfortunate, because
and I gotta say, I really enjoyed my time with the movie. I will like ripping that Band-Aid off. Loved my time with Madam Web. Flew by, loved it, want to watch it again. I'm right there for it. I want to watch the movie again. Knowing that the original plan was you need to protect this child and that maybe they were going to fail, that would bum me out. If I thought that's what the movie was and then I saw the movie that I saw, I understand why people are down on the film.
Well, I think they wanted it to be something, anything that gave them any answer as to what Sony is even up to. Do you get that?
I
you
do get
any
that.
type of overall
No,
impression
not
of
at
what
all.
Sony is?
No. This movie feels like the fillerest of filler in like the weirdest way. Like it
But
does.
that's what they said about Morbius, and that's what they said about Venom 2.
I know. And I mean, and they're fun movies. This is the type of movie I enjoy. This is the type of movie, and I'm pretty sure I said this about Morbius, where like if there were no superhero stuff in this movie and it was just Dakota Johnson as a New York Fire Department EMT paramedic trying to save these three women from getting murdered by a dude who for some reason wanted them dead, and there was no superpowers at all, I would still have enjoyed this movie. It honestly feels like a script, like a horror movie script, and then they're like, hey, we could paint this to kind of look like Spider-Man. And then not call it Spider-Man.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a great start to this conversation, Dev. I'm warning you that what you're
That's
saying.
fine. No,
I
like,
don't know what it sounds like to you, but out here it sounds like that's a real knock against this film.
well, this is Dale that I am paraphrasing here. It's sort of where I get after Morbius, so I am happy that seeing it in theaters sparked the same sort of revelation in her, is that these movies are more about the characters in the movies, and they're not about the bigger whole. Where, like, Marvel movies sort of felt like they were about feeding the universe. The Sony Spider-Man Universe movies, which it's so weird that it's called the Sony Spider-Man Universe if they literally can't say the word Spider-Man in the movies.
I don't know where that stands anymore, to be honest, with everything that has happened over the last 5-6 years in that regard. Because remember, one of the big things that we have talked about with the Marvel stuff, Disney Marvel stuff, is that all kind of got exploded when Sony was like, Spider-Man is ours again. And so, like, I don't know if they still have that power or what. I just don't want anybody to act like this movie, we don't know where Sony is in that regard right now, right? Like, you don't have any idea where Sony's in that regard.
All I know
right?
is that they never said Spider-Man in this movie, and that was one of my favorite things. But this movie's also been in the
works for 10 years.
Yeah,
so like,
exactly.
So.
But they never even say Peter Parker. Like, they get just as close as they possibly can without saying any of those things. So it does feel like this movie. The weirdest thing about it is that there are scenes in this film that are so like from that original script where it was about protecting Peter Parker, making sure that he was born. Like the rewrites, but then those scenes, they're like, we're not going to touch any of the dialogue here though. And it's like, well, that's fucking weird because that's fucking weird. Like the whole thing is, so Madam Web became Madam Web because her mother was researching spiders in the Amazon when she died. The scene that launched 1,000 gifs of haha and memes that does not appear in the movie, because of course it doesn't appear in the movie. Oh, Sony never change. And the reason that Madam Web, Cassandra Webb's mother, Constance Webb, was in the Amazon researching spiders when she died was because she had found out from a doctor that her child had like a degenerative disease, which meant that outside of the womb after she was born, the child could not survive. Like essentially, your baby's going to die once it's born. Sorry, is the whole story. And she goes, well, I'm going to research spiders, and I found a spider whose the peptides in its venom are rumored to give people superpowers.
So, to be clear, this then has to have happened. So, is she pregnant when she finds this out, or is this something in her genes that they say, if you ever get pregnant and you will have a child and it will not be able to survive?
The movie starts in the Amazon in 1973 with Constance Webb pregnant with Cassandra looking for the spiders.
Just so everybody's like, just so we're all on the same page then. In less than 9 months, this woman finds out that she is... I mean, first of all, it would have to be way less than 9 months, because for them to find this out about what's going on with the baby would have to be months already into the pregnancy. So let's be generous and say 3. There has to be a 6-month time span of her finding out that this is what's going on in her body, going out to the Amazon, finding the right spider, and something happening with it.
So she is between 7 and 8 months pregnant when she finds out that her child has myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune disease.
So in less than a month, she finds out that she has this sick child in her, and then goes out and finds these spiders, and then does something about it.
Because the doctor, when she tells her, she's like, they have all this research that they're working on. They're working on spiders in the Amazon, and she's like, well, that all of that is very experimental. I don't think there's time enough for you to do this. And she goes, I'll go to the Amazon myself. And the doctor's like, I cannot advise that you travel in your condition. Now, granted, it is 1973. It is blowing my mind that it is 1973, because also in 1973, first of all, now, in 2023, they cannot diagnose myasthenia gravis while the child is in the womb. So the movie's like, but in 1973, they knew. And then she also flies down to the Amazon and finds the spider.
Couldn't have been that hard.
Yeah,
it
right?
took her less than 3 weeks to do it.
Yeah, now it's not his fault. You know what? I was enjoying the movie at the time, but now that I'm examining it under the microscope, yeah, that's a bit of a plot hole. So she finds it, but also Ezekiel Sims, she hires him to be her bodyguard because of the folklore of the Las Arañas, you know, what Anya Corazon would eventually be called in the comics, or the spider people, who are rumored to run along the treetops of the Amazon and release venom into their victims to asphyxiate them to death, who are there to protect the spiders, who have given them the superpowers to protect the spiders. So Ezekiel Sims goes with her, and his whole gig is he don't want to get the spider to save her baby. He wants to get the spider to take advantage of its powers. So
but apparently there's tons of them.
There are thousands of these spiders.
Yeah, so
but they're protected by the Las Arañas.
Why can't it be both?
Yeah, right? But so what it is she finds the spider, right? They're down there. She finds her. I found one. She's got it in a little glass jar. And he comes and he sees it. He pulls out his pistol. He kills all the other people in the camp. And then he's wrestling her for the spider when he shoots her as well. And then the Las Arañas, they come down and they take her and they're like, we couldn't let that happen, so we tried to save you. They bring her to a magic cave in the Amazon. The spider bites her on the chest right above her heart, and then she gives birth to the baby, and the baby does not have that disease, but the mom dies. Because, you know, she was shot. It's not like she died because of the wound, or like she was killed by Ezekiel Sims. And then they're like, all right, well, the baby is strong and healthy, and one day she will return here when she needs the answers. And then we jump to 2003. And
so wait, what did they do with the baby?
What did they do with the baby?
Because there's nobody there to then take, like, is there like a, I don't know, is there like a helpful butler that's still alive that takes the baby somewhere?
I guess they take the baby to a hospital. She has a Peruvian birth certificate. That is a prop that exists in this movie.
Okay, I mean, hey, no, I'll give them credit where credit's due. That they at least stick with that. They don't, like, she would, at that point, I don't understand why they would send her away. Like, there's no reason to send her away, right? Just raise her as a member of the tribe. Why not just keep the baby?
Keep the baby, raise the baby, and then they're like, I don't know. That kind of ruins our whole we're spider people thing, having to raise a kid.
If you love something, set it free. They
right?
huck the baby into the river, just like
Moses. Later, Moses. See you when you need answers about your lineage.
I mean, you were starting to see though how some people are maybe watching this and are scratching their heads, right?
Oh yeah,
like,
no,
there's a lot that has happened in just this introduction that I haven't even seen, that I am all sorts of confused about.
That's fair.
In terms of structure of film.
I get that. I get it. But yeah, she is sent to. She lives in the foster system until she's 30, so she's like distant. A bit of a loner, a little disappointed that the movie did not open up with Miss Independent when they showed 2003, because she is Miss Independent. Let's be honest about it. And she gets a nice dig at, I just want to go home and watch Idol, right? Like, they should have started with Miss Independent from Kelly Clarkson, because the lesson that she learns by the end of the movies, big spoilers for the end of the movie, is that she can't be alone. She needs, like, her tribe in order to thrive in the world. And, her tribe is kind of Ben Parker. Ben Parker, who is a fire department New York paramedic EMT, and her partner in her bus, which is just crazy, right? Because it's the first time that I think Uncle Ben has ever been an EMT.
Yeah, and on top of that, the ways in which that connects her to them. See, so one of the other big things that people are really laying into is that if this is supposed to have taken place in the past and have some type of rippling effect going forward in the Sony movies, like, what effects have we seen in the world? Are they going to do anything to connect this to Venom? Are they going to do anything to connect this to Morbius in some way? I think that they did themselves a real disservice by ever saying these movies were ever going to be connected.
Oh,
if they had just done, as Dale put it, like, just done character-driven stories that did not try and feed into a larger world, like, if that had been all they had ever promised to be, maybe there'd be an easier way to view some of this stuff, right? But it was impossible to go into this movie without trying to figure out how it fit into the larger picture. It was impossible to go into this movie trying to figure out what the hell they were going to do with Spider-Man. It was impossible to go into this movie and not say, like why does this movie matter? And from everything that you've described so far, and what I'm assuming is the first 20 minutes of this movie, 30?
Yeah, about 20 minutes of this movie.
Yeah. It has done nothing to establish the stakes of this film in any meaningful way. And I think that's the bigger issue that I would point to with both Morbius and, like, the Venom movies, is that, like, as much as you can knock Marvel for wanting to connect everything and giving everybody FOMO and kind of arbitrarily, like, artificially inflating the importance of certain projects because they put one particular moment or character or scene in that's important to the big picture, and, like, yeah, like, no, that can get egregious, and there are definitely certain Marvel movies that are worse than others in that regard. Quantumania, I think, being, like, the worst example of that, right? Like, that movie purely exists just to kind of build other shit for the universe, and not really, and it's not fair to its own plot in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that you look at early Marvel stuff, like, Captain America, Iron Man, definitely feeding a larger universe, definitely informing a larger universe, but the stakes are always clear for the individual in those movies, right? Like, what the overarching story is definitely there, but never kind of like this main focus. And so, like, Marvel was already succeeding at that. Sony doesn't get to hold up that crown, as far as I'm concerned. Like, the idea that they just focus on character and not a larger universe is a fine way to critique these films versus the others. But I would point that the most successful Marvel Disney movies were already doing that. Sony isn't doing anything more than those movies, and certainly not doing them as well. At least from the ones that I have seen that I can point to. As somebody that couldn't even sit through the entirety of Morbius, and somebody that saw Venom and enjoyed Venom, I can even say, I don't even think Venom really does this. Like, the individual stories, fine. Not really feeding much of a larger story, but that's not what they want to do. Fine. But then, what are the stakes? Why do I care? If it is not about a larger universe, and the individual stories are not that good, they're giving me nothing to hold on to. Like, I shouldn't watch 20 minutes of your movie and not give a shit about the outcome.
I mean, that's an interesting thing to say. Like, I don't know. She's not really given any characterization in those first 20 minutes. I will admit that. The story doesn't kick off until about the 40-minute mark. That's incredible. That's got to be wrong. I have to be wrong on that. Because, like, Ezekiel Sims, when he sees his little vision of the three girls who are going to kill him, he is the one, like, it's called Madam Web, but the main character, like, the main driving force of the story is Ezekiel, and the fact that he has had a vision of the day that he will die, and he is killed by three spider-powered women, and his job is to go out and kill those three women while they're younger before they get their powers.
So imagine, though, like, this idea that there's only one of these spiders left in the world, as opposed to this being this, like, there's thousands of them in this part of the Amazon that people can stumble on in less than 3 weeks, right? Like they're not doing anything to do the individual stakes, right? Like, for this story. Like, it'd be much more it'd be much more meaningful if this idea that this spider is like the last of its kind and he fights this woman for it and like and it supposedly kills her, but that these people have some way of I don't there's nothing like why does he have to kill all these people to get this spider that apparently anybody has access to? What was stopping him from coming to the Amazon before to find this spider? What was where?
I don't think he had the
it...
knowledge. Like, the thing is that there's this really weird line in the opening where he's like, the folklore tells of the spider people, and da-da-da. And she's like, I'm a scientist. I don't really care about folklore. And that was the one minute in the movie where I'm like, wait a second. The best scientists will collect data from everywhere and then try to find something quantifiable about it. You being like, I don't care about folklore, but the fact that for hundreds of years, people have talked about a tribe of people who supposedly derive power from the venom of these spiders that you're searching for, that was just like the weirdest thing. Of like, no, I don't think about that. And it's like, but you should think about that, because right there, that's really your only proof that this spider you're searching for even exists, is the folklore of it.
Right. That's what I mean. It's like, is I'm fine with these movies wanting to disconnect from from the concept of a larger universe. I'm fine with these movies not leading into, the Sinister Six Avengers style team up. That's fine with me. But then they need to do a better job on an individual basis, because like if there's not gonna be this draw of me coming to this movie to see how it connects to these other films, then there has to be some other reason why I'm there. And there isn't enough meat on the bones of the character Madam Web for the average person out there for that to be enough. If they say we're making a Wolverine movie and it's completely disconnected from everything, or they've already did that, Logan, right? Like when they like, we're making Logan, it may or may not be connected to the universe. This is just the story we really want to tell with this character. People trusted in that character enough to still go. They trusted enough in the actor playing him to go and still see it and make it one of the more successful Marvel films, right? Yeah. Not under the banner of Disney Marvel at the time. Like it did a phenomenal job of doing that. So like they need to start doing that with these films. They really need to start considering, if they're not going to be part of a larger picture, then they need to be doing a better job of being these individual stories. Because right now, I'll be honest, the only reason I had any interest in going to see Morbius was because of, as much as it was getting dragged on, the idea of this connected universe that they were building, because I had heard about the after credit stuff and things like that. The only reason I had any interest in Madam Web to begin with was because there were these rumors that it was going to be the thing that was really going to start laying the groundwork for how they're all connected. I don't really know if that's part of the reason why I'm not really interested in going to see it now, is like now more and more that I don't hear about how it does that, and you basically confirming it doesn't do that.
I will confirm that it doesn't do that at all.
Then I don't really have much drive to see this movie. It's really got me starting to second guess some stuff with Craven. As fun as that preview looked, part of the reason I was interested in Craven was like, what is this going to tell about this story of them coming together? And if we're removing that, that's a cool idea. Superhero movies have depended on built universes for too long, and it's really started to bite them in the ass. So if we want to remove that concept so that we can still make cool superhero movies but not have to depend on these larger universe stories, I'm all for that. But I need to see a better individual hero story then. Like, they have just not produced that for me.
Yeah. I mean, the real thing, and we're going to talk about it when we finally talk about Spider-Man 2 in May of this year in a very special episode. These movies feel like, to me, and I said this with Morbius, and I will say it for Madam Web, what Sony was producing in the early 2000s. They were doing these movies that were kind of standalone. There could be a sequel to them, but honestly, if there was no Spider-Man 2 after the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, I don't think anybody would have been upset about that. Like, it's a self-contained film, and then the second movie comes along and it builds out the world, and even the ending, where like we'll talk about it, right? We'll discuss it. These feel like they've gone back to making movies the way that movies were made pre-Iron Man. And that is what I celebrate, but you also do bring up a good point. That is not what they're telling the audience. They are telling the audience this is our Sony Spider-Man universe. They coined that term. So if you're not going to make good on that actually being a universe, then what is the point?
But I also want to make it clear. I also don't think that using that lens to then watch these movies makes them any better. And I guess I can really only speak to Morbius in that regard. And to much to that point, Venom. Like a lot of my enjoyment about Venom was not really the movie itself. Like the movie is fun and like goofy and good, but noticeably I haven't gone back to Venom like really since I finally sat down and watched it. I didn't see it when it first came out because I wasn't hugely interested, but you really liked it, and a few other people that had seen it really
like that
enjoyed
movie
it.
a lot.
So I checked it out, and like I liked it okay, but I think what I liked most about it was the potential in it for what Sony was doing. So to find out that Sony's not doing that, I actually then have to kind of go back and view it as that individual story, and I don't think it's that good of a movie then in that regard, because I don't think there's enough there. There's so much promise in it about what could be there, but that never comes to be, right? And the same thing with Morbius. Again, I haven't even been able to finish that movie. I got 45 minutes into it, did not care a thing about anything going on in that movie for any individual character, so I just stopped watching. Like they're just not like if it's not part of this larger universe, then what is it? And it's like Spider-Man, we have gone back and watched. We did our episode on that. We're gonna do Spider-Man 2. Those feel like there are stakes within those movies. They are movies. They you know, Sam Raimi's a fantastic filmmaker. Like there's enough Sam Raimi-ness in those movies to still bring me back. There's enough going on in those movies that watching them on their own is fine. And the same goes for some of the early Marvel Disney stuff, you know, like Iron Man and Captain America and stuff like that. There are definitely movies in those series that really aren't worth going to if you're not going to be invested in the larger stories, right?
Yeah.
Like we've talked about plenty of those movies that feel just like connective tissue and things like that I probably won't go back to. I don't think I'll ever go back to Quantumania, just to go back to that example, right? Like that in that regard.
Poor
but
Paul
like,
Rudd.
I will see other Ant-Man movies.
Yeah, I know.
It's not
It's
even that
just,
I don't like the character of Ant-Man.
I know. I wish that movie had done better. Like thinking about it, it's been about almost a year since Quantumania came out, and it just was such a weird, like not even one of those things where my expectations were not tempered in some way. Like I didn't think it could be as bad as it was. I
still stand by the fact that there are two different movies there, and one of those movies is extremely good. The Ant-Man part of that
is fantastic.
Is fantastic. Anything having to do with Kang the Conqueror, anything having to do with Majors and that whole side of it, just feels so unnecessary in that movie. Is kind of unnecessary in the larger picture of things, especially now that we know everything else that's going on. Like it is so unnecessary and unimportant that it ends up hurting that film in the long run, right? It is a perfect example of the other side of this coin that we're talking about. When you're too connected to this larger universe that the movie itself can't stand on its own, that's no good. You shouldn't be making movies like that. And that's where Sony has the potential upper hand, is that if they really do want to lean into those individual stories that are not connected to a larger universe, they're in a really good place to do that with this stuff. But they then need to pick up the slack in the other regard, and they need to be making really good character movies. And I appreciate that this worked for you and that Morbius worked for you, but it didn't work for me, hasn't been working for me, and it does not appear to be working for a lot of people. Like I don't want the like the connected universe thing to overshadow, right? Like oh well, because they're not a connected universe, nobody's interested in them. Yeah, that's definitely part of the critique, but I think the larger critique is that since they're not connected to a larger universe, they need to be really good standalone films, and they're not even that.
So here's an interesting thing with everything that you just said. Superhero movies that I have rewatched, a lot of the reasons why they're very special episodes on this show is because I haven't seen them since that first time that I saw them. Think about something like X2, X-Men United, right? The one that we covered last July or June, one of those. I think it was July. We covered last July. I had not seen that movie since seeing it in the theater. And honestly, I am a person who will rewatch movies. I'm the guy who's seen Hackers at least 100 times. I have seen many movies multiple times. Hot Fuzz 7 times in the theaters. And like the Harley Quinn is the first kind of superhero movie that I did that. Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Saw that in theaters 6 times, which, Jesus, I mean, like, really just talks about what was in theaters pre the pandemic in 2020. That was the movie I was going to see, because I could see 3 movies a week, and there really wasn't other stuff, so I just kind of fit that one in. But it's like all of those superheroes movies before where you're like, I would never revisit it, or I've revisited it, and this isn't one that I would revisit. I think that, personally, for Devon Decker, I don't ever need to revisit these superhero movies. I've clearly done it for other ones, but even like the Marvel stuff, until I did that big rewatch while we were stuck at home during the pandemic, there were some of those movies I would have never watched again. So yeah, I think
rewatch, and maybe it's a little bit of a disservice just limiting it to the concept of rewatch. Yeah. I mean, I won't even revisit those movies in conversation. There isn't anybody I'm ever going to talk to Quantumania about outside of like you, right? Like when we talk about like, oh, what I hope to see in future movies, or remember like, oh man, my beloved Paul Rudd movies. That's just not going to come up. So like, it's not just rewatch. Like rewatch is like the purest example of revisiting a film that I can think of. So like, that's why I lean on it so much. But when I talk about it in that regard, I mean like, it's not a movie that I care to think about again. It's not a movie that I care to engage with again. And that's where I find myself with these Sony movies as well. And like, part of that is because I was promised this larger universe that didn't come to be. But we have all admitted that cannot be a thing. That cannot be a standard for these movies going forward. They won't survive if that's a standard we hold them to. And I agree with that in some regard. So with that in mind, I'm happy to go back and relook and revisit some of these movies. But like, it's just not going to happen with these. Like, because on top of them not being connected, they don't hold anything individually for me that's fun to talk about either. Like, there's nothing. It's not even like I want to go to a trivia night and have this be one of the answers. I am just so disinterested in connecting with these films because they've just not given me anything that's really fun to. Whereas, like, you talk about how you hadn't seen X2 since it had come out, but like, we have talked about X2 before, and people around you have talked about X2.
Yes.
X2 was part of conversations when people would talk about like the pre-Disney era Marvel and things like that. Like that, it wasn't like you hadn't thought about that film until then, right? Like, and that's more what I'm talking about in that regard.
I get that. And then to go one step further, I mean, like, comic books, a lot of times you read a comic book once and then you're done with it, right? I think about Kevin Smith and his whole, after I read a comic book now, I just tear it up. And that whole thing and how that like sent shockwaves through. I will say that, like, I think my whole thing of watching a comic book movie maybe just the one time and that being my experience with it, and then I could have discussions about it to go to your level, right? Like, I've never reread The Infinity Gauntlet, right? I had never read it. I read it when it was new, and then when I saw that it was going to be the basis for like the actual appearance of Thanos in the MCU, I reread it again. And then my thought process was, wow, I remembered a lot of the things that are happening in the movies, but like, where's Moondragon? Where is this version of Drax the Destroyer? Where is Adam Warlock? Like, all of these characters that are hyper important to that storyline who either did not exist or existed in a way that was so diametrically opposed to what happens in that actual Infinity Gauntlet saga from like 92, right? Mm-hmm. So like, it was this weird thing where I'm like, well, rereading it, I had fun rereading it, right? Like, I've reread Watchmen a bunch of times, but like, Watchmen feels like a book, and I will reread books. But comic books, and then as a result, comic book movies, are kind of a one and done for me. Like, the times that I've seen movies again in theaters while they're out, it's so that I can have that conversation you're talking about. But I don't think I've discussed like The Last Stand since that night that we saw The Last Stand. And that's an interesting thing about where it is. And yes, and as much as I was looking forward to Madam Web, and I knew that we were going to talk about it here, I'm probably not going to think about Madam Web anymore. A, because nobody else is going to want to have a conversation about Madam Web after this weekend. This is the time to do it. I will say this, if you have a podcast or anything and you want to have someone on to talk about Madam Web and be the pro guy, It's at Devon D. Decker on Twitter. Find me, or X, whatever it's called, or just send an email to thesarahboard@gmail.com. I want to talk about this movie because where everybody else is like enjoying it because it's room-esque or something like that, I enjoyed it for what it did with these characters that I cared about since I was about 13 years old.
Have you heard of anybody enjoying it because it's room-esque?
Oh yeah, that seems to be the big thing that I'm seeing on social media, is that this was one of the worst movies that I've ever seen. I enjoyed every minute of it. This is the female version of The Room. These are the things that I'm seeing from people who say they enjoyed it.
I have heard kind of the exact opposite of it is so, like, it is not so bad that it's watchable, but it's also not good enough to be watched. Like, it is a forgettable film, and you are watching a bunch of people that normally are very good at their job just not putting any effort in. Like, and I haven't seen it, so like I can't say that is my personal opinion. But it's interesting to me that you're engaging with people that are saying that it's so bad that it's on the level of The Room, which potentially means that there are people that are like willing to watch it multiple times. You know what I mean? Like there's, when you put it in that category, you've put it back into the watchable territory. And I think with everything that we're seeing about nobody going to see it, that doesn't seem to be the story to me. The story to me is that it is so middle of the road, if like that it just isn't even fun to watch in that regard. Like, so like that is like saying that it's on the level of The Room puts it in a place where, kind of like Morbius, where it ended up actually getting a little bit of a bump to the point where Sony thought they could re-release it. I don't see that happening with Madam Web. I don't think there's going to be a third or fourth week sudden bump in the numbers on it from people who morbidly curious, Morbiusly curious, have to go check it out, right?
I would love if the internet could gaslight Sony into re-releasing Madam Web this summer. There's no fucking way it happens. And that's just a fact. I mean, once bitten, twice shy, right? Not to quote a Great White song, it's also a phrase, but it is one of those situations where, yeah, no, I don't think that it will ever happen again. And I think that based on what we're seeing with Madam Web so far this weekend, $6 million on its opening weekend, the fact that it was all but abandoned, the only thing that was abandoned harder than Madam Web was the Marvels. Because Marvel officially said, we're kind of fucking washing our hands of this movie.
Well, and actually, Madam Web is potentially in a place to do even worse in that regard, because the Marvels at least still had an international release.
Yeah.
And there are talks that Madam Web may not be hitting certain markets, since it might not be worth it for them, money-wise, to ship it.
Yeah.
So there straight up are going to be markets in this world that just don't get this movie, potentially. That has not actually happened yet. But there is conversation about that, which actually will put it on an even worse standing than the Marvels, because as much as Marvel did like straight up wash their hands of the Marvels, they at least still released it everywhere so that everybody had the chance to go see it.
Yeah. I mean, the difference is that I don't know if Sony would ever wash their hands of Madam Web. The marketing that has gone into the lead up to this movie has been kind of crazy. I mean, yes, we didn't see anything for it during the Super Bowl, which was, I mean, we discussed off mic how strange that was for the big superhero movie that's coming out 3 days after this event. Like, to not even give it a 30-minute spot and be like, hey, this movie's coming.
Second.
Yeah, 30 seconds, sorry. 30-second spot to be like, hey, this movie's coming. I think I keep saying 30 million because of the 8 million, 30 minutes because of the $8 million. $8 million for 30 seconds of airtime is insane to me. Yeah, I think my mind's like, no, it's got to be 30 minutes, Devon. What are you talking about? Just to talk about my own neuroses for a second. The fact that there was nothing was crazy. But it wasn't that they had stopped marketing it. They did a weird cross-market with Raven-Symoné that is fantastic. Because of the whole precognition abilities of Madam Web, they leaned into the fact that her character on That's So Raven has the same sort of visions. And just did a weird marketing Instagram stuff. That was on Instagram. That was on Instagram, and then it went over to TikTok, and then they kind of tried to do like viral marketing, and like enough that I saw it as somebody who wasn't searching for anything. I actively avoid advertising once movies are out because of the Sejohn's gambit of it all, right? Friggin' the Beekeeper Siege and Gambit is insanity.
Yeah, I know.
Like, just to put our name on something. But like, so the marketing kept going with this whole movie, but just like in very viral, sort of affordable markets.
Yeah, but to get to your statement that I don't think that Sony will ever wash their hands like Marvel did. That I don't think Sony's in the same position that Disney Marvel was with the Marvels.
Right.
So I don't think they have to. Like, I don't think that they feel any need to. Like, as far as, you know, that they're willing to take these hits. Sony is willing to take these hits. I don't know how willing they're going to be to keep taking these hits, but it's not like Disney, who feels like they need to come out and do something to save face in front of a certain number of investors and people and watchful eye and things like that. Like, Sony's just in a very different place than Disney Marvel is. So I don't think they're in any position to need to do that whole like washing of the hands, ritualistic sacrifice to everybody on Twitter, you know, like that. They just don't need to do that.
True. That's fair. I would like to look at how much it's made on Box Office Mojo since we're talking about the film.
Madam Web, you mean?
Yeah, Madam Web. But let's see what it's done so far.
Madam Weeby.
Madam Weeby. Don't do that. That's mean. That's mean to Madam Web.
What's wrong? Steve Weeby's a good guy. Steve Weeby. Everything that we've been hearing about Billy Mitchell the last few weeks, and I'm not going to sit here and support Weeby. Yeah, no.
So the latest dailies, 6 mil on Wednesday, 2 mil on Thursday, 4 mil on Friday. Is not great. I will admit that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes me sad. I'm sorry. Oh, Megan 2.0 had a release date change. It's not coming out January 17th, 2025. Coming out May 16th, 2025. Sorry. Just sorry, because it's literally right in front of me and kind of crazy. Yeah, so Madam Web has made, what, 4, 6, 10 to $12 million right now?
I think it's being reported as an 80 million project altogether.
Yeah.
That may include marketing. I'm not sure.
Well,
hard to say with those numbers, but... Yeah.
And again, we don't have Saturday yet. It's too early to have Saturday. And I mean, it's going to be an extended weekend sort of situation where, I mean, even Monday is technically it's a federal holiday. I know that I don't have it off, and a lot of other people I know don't get President's Day off anymore. But like, when the numbers release for Madam Web, it will be on Tuesday, and they will say that the take is for essentially 6 days of it being available to people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I didn't even tell you the best part about the story, right? I like hinted at it this whole freaking time leading up to it. I haven't told you it. This is how we end the Madam Web discussion. Then we have some other things to talk about. Sejohn, I bought my tickets to Madam Web as soon as they went available. You know this. I did not shut up about it, right? I kept telling you, as soon as these tickets are available, I want to get these tickets.
To be clear to everybody, you were buying tickets for a Friday showing afternoon, even though it came out on Wednesday, right?
Right. I was not trying to see it on Wednesday. I worked, but I know, like, I don't feel bad taking a half day on Friday and then going to go see the movie, right? Like a 1 o'clock is good. I go in for 4 hours and then I can get to the movie theater, right? I don't feel bad about that. I have time. I earn time. I don't need to justify my time off. Sorry. I'm just saying. So I wanted to see it Friday in the afternoon, earliest showing possible. Generally, there's not as many people at those showings. I'm still not 100% comfortable going to the movie theaters because of COVID and everything after that, right? I wear a mask the whole time that I'm in the theater. I'm still taking those precautions. And if I go to like a 1 o'clock on Friday show, maybe like, I think the most other people who've been in one of those is 10. It's me and 10 other people. Maybe Indiana Jones was more than that, Dial of Destiny. But even then, no, there was not a lot after that movie. So I see tickets finally go up for the Friday. They didn't have it in laser projection, which is another one of my big things. If I can't see the movie in laser projection, I don't really want to pay to go to the movie theater because the cost does not make sense to me, since at home I'm going to be able to buy it for $4 more when it comes available at home release, right? Yeah. And the fact that I'm not going to have to wait like 3 months like I used to. This is probably going to be available in 2 to 4 weeks for me to watch at home. There's a lot of math that goes into it. But for Madam Web, I was excited. I didn't want to have it spoiled for me. I wanted to enjoy this film. When tickets eventually go up on sale, the earliest showing is 1:30, and it's not in laser projection. But I'm like, I'm still going to get the tickets. I want to see the movie. It was at least in one of the larger format cinemas. One of the like 3-tier ones at the Warwick Showcase. They have like 8, 9 are the 2 big ones that they have at that theater. And it was in 9. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. Then as we got closer and closer to the film releasing, they released, it's going to be in laser projection. So I canceled my seats in 9 and there was going to be a 1 o'clock showing in laser projection. I'm all about that. That's what I preferred. Canceled, booked my seats again. Everything is feeling good. It is the day before I'm going to go see this movie. It is the Thursday before I have my tickets. My tickets are for 1 p.m. in the laser projection theater. Now that the movie has been out for a couple of days, I think I'm going to see if they have it an earlier showing, right? What movie? The Marvels, I saw a 9:45 a.m. showing. That was perfect, right? Had my whole day before me. Like,
was it a holiday or something? Why did they
I have no idea.
Showing?
They had a 9 a.m. showing. Then they had a 9 a.m. showing of Aquaman 2. Like, that's the reason why I did that as well. And that was during, like, holiday times that Aquaman 2 came out. So
yeah, we're going to talk about Aquaman in just a second here, by the way. But because I got some numbers in front of me that are kind of interesting. But
look forward to it.
I want you to finish.
So I go online to see if there's anything earlier than the 1 p.m. showing that I have tickets for. And they are showing an 11:30 a.m., a 2:15 p.m., and a 10 p.m. My showing is gone. There is no 1 p.m. laser showing anymore. I have not received any word from the showcase saying that the time of my movie has changed. I have not received like a cancellation because we're not showing it at that time anymore. I'm a little nervous because I'm supposed to be go seeing a movie tomorrow at 1 a.m., at 1 p.m., right?
Right.
So I go to the 11:30, and the only tickets that are sold are the seats that I have booked to see this movie. So I'm like, I hope those are my seats, right? But at the other time, I'm like, if I am going to go see it, I'm going to try to go see it as early as possible, and someone else has the seats that I want.
Right.
So I call the theater. I still have a phone number that gets you in touch with a human being at that theater. It's probably one of my like biggest possessions that I have, right? Like guarded secret. Call up. Hi. I have tickets to see Madam Web tomorrow at 1 p.m. and I'm not showing that as a showtime on your website anymore. And they're like, yeah, there's no 1 p.m. showing of Madam Web. I go, okay, cool. I have tickets for it though. And I haven't received anything saying it's canceled or anything like that. Can we look up the account I bought them on and you could tell me when my movie is or if it's not happening? So I give them my information and they're like, yeah, you have tickets for the 11:30. And I'm like, can you tell me the seats that I have? And they tell me the seats. So they're the seats that I have booked. And I'm like, okay, were you going to tell me about that? Was there going to be any indication to me that my movie got moved up 90 minutes? Or is I going to show up for a movie at 1 p.m., which is what my pre-order ticket says is the time of the movie, and then be very disappointed because my movie is 90 minutes over?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, I don't know how they do it. Like, we never had a 1 p.m. available. I'm like, you did. I bought tickets for it. I have the receipt. And I'm like, but I'm good. Now it's at 11:30, I come, I'll be fine. But that's frustrating. So then at 9:30, right? Because 2 hours before the start of the movie, they send you here's a reminder that you have a movie coming up because you pre-bought your tickets. I get the reminder for my movie thing, right? Yeah. But then, Sejohn, at 11:30, I got the same email for my 1 o'clock. Like, I'm sitting in the theater, I'm watching the movie right now. What are you doing?
Man,
it was just
this is such an old school problem because I remember back in the day when you used to have to be able to what you used to do is look up the movie times in the newspaper, and like I remember there being pretty distinct times, specifically at that Hoyt's, the one that became the event, eventually became the Dirt
The
Theater
Dirt
and the
Theater, yeah.
DDP. But back when it was the Hoyts, they used to be infamous for this with my family. We would always call to verify show times when we were going to a movie, because there was a couple of times that we would show up and they'd be like, "Oh, we don't have that showing on Thursdays," and it's like, okay, well, the newspaper that came out this morning has that showing, and they're like, "Oh, those are the show times for the weekend. We just put those in." Like it was like we just put in all of the show times for the weekend, and then they basically line up for throughout the week, but they don't always. So at that point, my family's like, "Okay, we're always calling. If that's the theater we're going to, we're gonna call in advance." And I remember having to like do that on certain movies. Like, "Are you guys actually showing Snow Day at noon tomorrow? Thank you." Like,
You use me to spit my water out, Siege, and there's a lot of electricity in front of me. Yeah, like, but it was just, it felt so strange. Like, if I buy my ticket in advance and then the time changes, just send me an email saying that.
I almost wonder if like you did get one, but it's in like buried in like a thread, or like it came through a spam or something. They must have done something.
I don't
right?
know. I poured through my
Wild.
email. I had nothing that said
No,
it.
I mean, like, also, as somebody that has worked on the other side of customer service, there's plenty of reasons why people don't get the emails that are sent out. And like, you can't really blame the customer when they're like, "I don't see it," because there's always that chance they don't. And like, that's just misery.
I was too excited for Madam
I'm
Web
glad you
that I
figured
would
it
have
out,
missed it.
though.
Oh yeah, me too. I would have been
So
very upset. So tell me
just
this
to-
Aquaman stuff.
Just to kind of put some stuff in perspective, and Devon was right. Like, it's important to remember that Aquaman did come out over a holiday, came out over Christmas, but in less theaters, Aquaman was averaging for its first week $2,000 to $3,000 per theater. It was making that much money in every day for the first week it was out. Now, again, that was over a holiday break, but since Madam Web has been out, there's only 3 days up on Box Office Mojo that are accounted for, and by its second day, it was making less than $1,000 per theater. Like, it is making $1,500 on its first day, and you have to remember that average is a bit inflated because first release days on Box Office Mojo also include any pre-show numbers
From the day before, yeah.
Yeah, so if it was also showing on Tuesday or Monday in places for what do you call it, events, premiere events, like those numbers get thrown in on the Wednesday release. So release days always have a little bit of that inflation on them,
bump.
which is one of those. Yeah. So that day is $1,500 per theater, and it's in more theaters than Aquaman was, and it was making less money. And then on top of that, by its next day, it's under 1,000. It's at 500. It's at $530 per theater. Like, it didn't even and Aquaman was considered pretty much the nail in the coffin for DC, right? Like the ways in which we talk about the Marvels, and I always want to talk more about Quantumania and really lay this more at the feet of Quantumania, but the way that stuff symbolized kind of Disney Marvel really needing to call the emergency meeting, right?
Yeah.
Aquaman is kind of that for DC, and the idea that Madam Web is honestly not even the first movie to do this to Sony, and Sony just doesn't seem to be hasn't responded yet to it. Not that they have to, I guess. I guess it's just more like curiosity. Like, what does Sony do with this information now?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It is a little bit strange. Here's what I'll say though. I saw Aquaman 2 as well. I really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed that one because it had a sense of humor, where a lot of the DC movies, they don't have that sense of humor, or at least its sense of humor is not in line with mine. Really liked Black Adam, and again, because the humor in that movie is one of the things that elevated it. There's a lot of humor in Peacekeeper. What is his freaking name? I have him in front of me. John Cena as the comedian. That show really worked for me because of the comedic sensibilities about it. And Jason Momoa just having fun as Aquaman, that was a lot of fun. Madam Web, where everybody's saying it's this unintentional comedy and things like that, I was really interested in what was going on. I was connected to the story, and it was some cool stuff in the story. So it's also a different kind of movie than the way that I felt about Aquaman. I can enjoy comic book movies on different layers and levels is what I'm saying by bringing that up. Also, it's weird that
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You seem to be one of the few people that can figure out what the fuck is going on in this movie.
Yeah, no, but it's here's the big question that I have with it, right? The real thing is when I walk away from Madam Web, there was this distinct moment where I'm like, I feel like the attack on this film, as much as there are other things, is kind of that same thing that drove like the attacks on Answer the Call. It's this all-female led movie in a space that traditionally has been male led, and I wondered how much that might affect it. And that kind of sucked to even have to have that thought. But like, I think it's partially because I finally saw a trailer for Frozen Empire that made me excited to go see Frozen Empire.
Yeah, I will
Like,
say that I don't think that that's I have not heard any of that in the water with this movie in terms of like pushback because first of all, Answer the Call famously actually has a very like vocal fan base, people that do like it. It's just not as vocal or as large as the people that don't, right?
right.
So there was a lot of people with Answer the Call that were fighting back against a lot of that, which led to a lot more of that information really surfacing and, really kind of took the mask off of a lot of people's asshole-ish tendencies in that regard. There was a lot of, as much as there were legitimate complaints about that movie, there were a lot of wolf in sheep's clothing that were getting called out for that with that. With this movie, I don't see that happening. And in fact, I would argue that a large part of what's going on is that in this movie, the criticism for it is being laid at the idea that the people in this movie, again, this is what I have heard from the circles on this end, the criticism is that these people are better than this. Like, people know what Dakota Johnson is capable of, especially because, like, as somebody that saw her as a lead in a Sundance film just last year, and like it came out as one of my favorite films, and we saw Apple, kind of made records with the amount of money it's spent on this Dakota Johnson produced led like film in that regard. Like, people are looking at this movie and saying the women involved deserved better than what this movie gave them. Yeah. Which is noticeably not the way that people talked about Answer the Call, in which there was a lot of issues with, like, oh, I don't like the way that Leslie Jones portrays, black female figures on screen, like, just to kind of politely point to some of the stuff being said about that movie, right? Or the ways in which Kate McKinnon plays this androgynous character in the background really kind of pushes me towards some feelings I have about that, right? Like, I'm not hearing any of that about this movie. All I'm hearing about this movie is that as far as the women involvement in this film, they deserved a better movie than this to be in, is all I keep hearing.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that. Everybody's saying that Dakota Johnson might hate Madam Web. I get it if she signed on for a script that was kind of a horror story that ended with the death of Peter Parker as an infant. Mm-hmm. That is, as soon as I heard that was the initial thing, not even that he was going to die, but that like their goal was to protect an unborn Peter Parker.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they probably would have softened it a little bit, like maybe his parents get killed before he's born as opposed to after, that kind of thing, right? Or like maybe something happens where I actually thought it'd be really interesting if in succeeding in saving Parker's parents, he never becomes Spider-Man because he doesn't ever go to live with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, right? Like, so actually, like, they could have had a happy ending that also really fucked up everything, right?
Yeah, like he's born, but then because of all the threats on their lives, they never go do the things that ultimately lead to their death that leads to him being raised by
or
May
this being
and Ben.
the threat that this being the thing that normally would have led to their death and him going to live, but by succeeding in protecting the Parkers, which they think they're doing is the right thing because at this point in the timeline, right? And this whole thing is like, like the way that it would have played with time would have been phenomenal. But we are doing that thing where we're putting it into a larger context story that Sony doesn't seem really interested in making, but they really want the marketing to really push that so that you come to it. You know what I mean? And like they've got to stop. They've got to either drop the universe thing and really focus on making better individual stories, or they've got to really start leaning into this universe thing and really showing me why that matters. Because right now, I don't love them as individual films, and I don't love them as a big universe building film. And with neither of those hooks, I don't have any reason to continue going to these movies.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's characters I care about, and I care about, like, I never thought I'd see Maddie Franklin on screen. I never thought that. And the way that it is, I mean, then the other weird thing about Madam Web, I just want to get it out there, is the three women, right? Like, even though they're all in their 20s, are playing 16-year-olds, and the sexualization that I've seen about these characters online is kind of disgusting. Like the guy who got thrown out of a screening of Madam Web for masturbating, like that's weird. because he said he was
Yeah.
masturbating to Sydney Sweeney. And yes, Sydney Sweeney is in her 20s, but she's playing a character who's 16 years old.
And none of that forgives you taking
Yeah.
your penis out in public. Like, it
Right.
doesn't matter what the fuck is on screen in front of you.
Yeah, even if she
None
were of
that
age,
justifies
right? Like,
the
no
act
one is.
of public masturbation.
Yeah, right? It's just, I'm not trying to do, but it's just like, I never even, like, they're young. Like, the scene where they're adults is 10 years into the future. And that scene is in shadow. There's nothing really there that, like...
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no, I will say that in, just kind of in regards to what you were saying about some of the really shitty attitudes towards women in film and
Yeah.
the ways in which that might be affecting things, I will say that, like, yeah, there is definitely some very vocal shit going on about these characters that echoes stuff that has always been said in the comics and echoes stuff that women in film have dealt with their entire like careers and lives, and that is really gross. Like in that regard, this is a female-led, a woman-led superhero movie that that has the potential to really push people in some really bad ways when it comes to criticism and critique and things like that. But at the end of the day, like, this is a problem across the board for film right now, right? Like this idea that they are supposed to be playing these younger characters, and does it matter what age the actresses are? Does none of that matters to the conversation? Because at the end of the day, people should also just not be gross.
Right, exactly. Right, yes. They
like,
shouldn't be objectifying women regardless, but it's just, it hits a little differently when, like, I thought they were older and they were going to have spider powers, and this is all because of the marketing, right? So these people, like, is like, oh, okay, well, you know, Sydney Sweeney, you know, and everybody talks about how attractive she is, whatever. I'm not one of those people who engages in those conversations. Doesn't mean that you're going to avoid it on the internet. But then when I see the movie and I'm like, oh my God, they're all like 16, and that's like crucial to the plot of this movie, is the fact that they are young women who are all kind of looking for maternal figures, and that's what Madam Web becomes to them. Like, that's a really interesting story, but then it's also kind of gross that you're like, oh, look at that, like, gross, man, like, gross. And then I want to celebrate the wardrobe of this film. Like, this is the costuming on this movie was excellent. The way that these girls, as young women, before they become Spider Women, right, before they get their powers, reflect like the costumes they eventually wear, and the women that they're going to grow into once they get their spider powers, is beautiful. The costuming department understood the assignment, but then also the costuming department put a bunch of 20-year-olds playing 16-year-olds in very sexually suggestive outfits. And there's only one moment where it's like, no, but like, tie up your shirt so that you look cuter for those boys that we're going to hit in the diner. And like, it's like a narrative reason for it to happen. The other stuff is just like,
I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, I appreciate the idea that you do have to consider the idea that these women were not necessarily in control of what they got to wear on screen.
Right,
I think that is an important conversation to have. But I also want to make sure that we are not getting to that point where we're saying that they're like people should be able to dress any way they want to dress and not be sexually assaulted. Period.
Right?
Like,
Yes,
it doesn't
of course.
matter
Yes.
what they're put in. They don't. They still shouldn't get ogled. They still shouldn't get leered at. They still shouldn't have people literally masturbating in public theaters about it. Like, it doesn't matter what they're wearing.
Yeah.
Like yeah, there is something to be said about that with the costuming stuff. I would point out, as somebody that has worked on film and theater, that conversation is usually a two-way street. Like, I'm not saying it always is. There's definitely those artists out there that are utter assholes, costumers that say, like, this is going to be the look for this figure. Stop arguing with me. Like, that has definitely happened in front of me, and I don't want to deny that does happen. But that is not the norm. The usual case is usually it is a two-way conversation between actor and costumer about like what they want, what they're comfortable with, what they believe. Because at the end of the day, like the actress is still in a position of power, and we have learned over the years that they have not been given as much power as they should in those conversations, for sure. This is a movie that has really kind of succeeded in not allowing itself to become about that in so many ways, that I like to think that means that there was more going on behind the scenes. But I just, there is a line to be drawn at some point of it doesn't matter what they're dressed like especially if they're dressing like 16-year-olds dress,
Yeah,
like it doesn't matter
especially in
if you feel like it's too
2003.
much.
It is
Yeah,
what
I
it's what
mean,
girls wore like when I was in high school with them. I
well
will admit that,
then
but
there it is. Like there's no discussion to be had there about like they were dressed too scantily. Like it doesn't matter what they wear. They're allowed to, like, as characters within the world, like we should accept that they are allowed to wear that they want to wear in order to be the people that they are,
yeah,
right? Like there's something to be said about that. Like yes, there is definitely a conversation on the meta level about being an actress in film, like, and being in that position. How much power do you have to say to the costume designer for a movie that has probably, straight up probably won awards at some point for what they do, and you're just this young actress who, it feels like you don't have the ability to say to them then in that position, I don't want to wear this, I'm not comfortable wearing this. That is definitely an important discussion to have. But as that has not really come out as like an issue that this movie had, I don't want to like push that on this. You know what I mean? I
I
don't know.
guess the reason why it's something that's in my head is Dakota Johnson's, I believe it was a joke, but maybe it was her revealing her true feelings on SNL. Madam Web is sort of like a movie that the AI generated for your boyfriend, right? So, like, that seems like a comment about things. And then when everybody, like, the conversation that I have seen on social media is about Sydney Sweeney, and her character is the one in like the shortest skirt and all of these other like costuming elements. She is legitimately, Julia Cornwall feels like the girl who is made unattractive because she doesn't know how to wear clothes properly and wears glasses. She
Right.
is
If
like
she
that
just took her
trope.
glasses off and whipped her hair around,
Yeah.
she'd be the most popular girl in school
Yeah,
type
like
trope.
that
I gotcha.
seems like what they went with for that character. If we're looking at tropes that are borrowed from the 2000s to costume these three girls, and
I
like
will
so,
say that one of the biggest things that's levied against Sony and has been since back in the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man days is also that this is the kind of nonsense that they lean into, right?
mhm.
Which is part of the reason why the stuff with Ghostbusters 2016 blew up as much as it did, is because Sony is so kind of egregious in these particular conversations for this style of filmmaking. Playing up sexuality maybe more than they should in characters and situations, and essentially they make movies like we still did in the 90s. I mean, this kind of goes to this whole conversation you said about how it felt like a movie from the pre Disney Marvel days, and like, yeah, including all the warts which come with it, which are things like this, like hypersexualization of characters in these positions and stuff like that. But in terms of like comfort and stuff like that, I would definitely say that if like actresses are coming out and saying things about it, like Dakota Johnson even just making a joke, then like I totally can see where that conversation would come from. It becomes, you got to be really careful that you don't start like accusing people of these
Right,
things, right? Like,
right.
and saying like, man, they just purposely put these women in sexy outfits just because, and it's just like, well, we got to be like careful about that, because sometimes what is a overly sexual outfit to you might just be somebody's church clothes on Sunday, and that's just what they like to wear, and like telling people that they can't wear it because it's too sexy for you is a you
Yeah,
problem, not
exactly.
a
That's a
them
you
problem.
problem. That's you can't dance
Right.
because my son was in a drunk driving accident dancing outside of the town. So nobody in this town can dance. Like in Top Gun. But yeah, yes, it's an interesting thing when you think about if these girls were of age. It's that same conversation with, like, was it Ironheart, where they like hypersexualized her on a cover? It's like, it's also these conversations that we see in comics, and it's like, yes, they cast older women to play these younger roles, but like, yeah, but was that an excuse to be able to sexualize 16-year-olds?
Well,
Like
and
it's
remember, but also, yeah,
like
but
it's
comics is a little bit of a different conversation, because at the end of the day, these are ink. Like
yeah,
these
right.
women literally cannot speak for themselves because they do not exist, right? And like, and yeah, the Ironheart stuff gets weird because like they had her. You're talking about the cover that they had where they had Riri in like a t-shirt and panties on
Yeah.
like a cover, but like there was an argument about how like what she was doing on that cover, it would make sense for her to just be in hangout clothes, blah blah blah. What does this look like in terms of a, yeah, and weird, hard conversation that, to be frank, I am personally not equipped to really have
Right,
at the moment,
exactly. I
right?
don't think
But at
either
the
of
end of
us
the
are. But
day, but at the end of the day, if it is a woman under the age, I'm very confident in saying that if it is a woman under the age of 18 and they are in a sexually compromised position that you have put on the cover of your comic book to sell, that feels really gross to me. I am comfortable making that call,
yeah, yeah,
making that blunt statement, if as it were, right? And so there's definitely something to be said about that, but film, it becomes a little bit of a different conversation in that regard, because while we like to act like the thing that we're seeing on screen is the vision of the director or the vision of an individual behind the scenes of some kind, at the end of the day, these are people that do have the ability to speak for themselves. The important thing is finding out whether or not they were given those opportunities or not. I'd
yeah.
like to think that where we are right now in 2023, or as this movie was being made over the last few years, that we were in a place where they had you know, better opportunities and rights to stand up for themselves in that regard. We know that that's not the case. We know that that's not true.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just mentally, there's a lot of things that are sort of woven together in my mind about over sexualization and a Spider Woman character when you think about that Jessica Drew cover. So, like, when I'm watching a movie about Spider Women before they're Spider Women, like, some of those questions are going to just creep into the
No,
corners.
I mean it's
like,
it's a fair question to ask about any, especially in the superhero genre,
yeah,
where where in the comics, there's, like you mentioned, there's always these weird excuses to get people into compromising positions. We have seen in the movies over the years, especially in like the 90s and stuff,
yeah.
which this movie seems to be harkening back to in the early 2000s and the 90s filmmaking. Like, we know that. Like we used to joke about the first Ghost Rider movie from Paramount, and about how, like, as that movie got worse and worse and went on, it almost felt like the director was like purposely like making Ava Mendes unzip more of her clothes. Like, as you watch that movie, she just has like less and less and less just clothes on, and it just felt like it was like them trying to do anything to save the movie, which is not fair to Ava Mendes. But that movie, well, there's another example of a woman that deserved better than the film she was in, right?
Yeah. I don't know. So Madam Web, I mean, I liked it. I mean, I joked that it would change my life. It didn't change my life. It's really, I enjoyed my time with it. I was kind of a little happy to be proven wrong that it was not the Spider-Woman 3 storyline. But I did get to finally see Maddie Franklin on screen. And honestly, you go back to Devon Decker reading comic books back in 1999, he would have never thought that, right? Even just going back 10 years to when I posted up, like, name this character, and absolutely nobody knew who she was when I shared her.
I'm a little confused in the whole concept that, and again, this kind of speaks more to like the Sony marketing,
Yeah.
we're making a connected universe stuff, but I don't quite understand how she's as villainous as somebody like Venom or Craven
Well,
or
I don't think
Morbius.
she's a villain. She's a hero.
Well,
I think
so
you build out both.
I've see, so my impression is that there's a lot of stuff in the comics with her pulling a lot of, like, maybe Amanda Waller, Nick Fury style might be the best way to place her, behind the scenes pulling a bunch of quote unquote strings. That's not my pun. That's literally what everybody wants to say.
Yeah.
Right. Of like Madam Web not being a good person necessarily.
She's
because of the
immoral.
ways in
I would
which
say that. She's an immoral
yeah,
character.
right. But I would, but for this movie, it really feels like that's just not where they go at all with her. Am I wrong in
They
feeling
don't
that?
even go that the super. Here's the thing. Everybody freaked out because there was that cranberry juice bottle from the Far East area, like Asia markets, that showed her in her costume. She's in that costume for like less than a minute. She never becomes a costumed hero in this movie.
Right, but as a character, is she in any way like questionable? Like, does she use
no,
her like
she's
like
trying to save 3 girls from dying. That's it.
right? It's just because the whole Sony concept has been, we're going to take these bad guys and we're going to show that while they're bad guys, they will have to come together. Like, it just, again, it speaks more to that whole kind of overarching story that Sony has, like, at the very least, if they haven't been pushing it, have not done anything to stop it over the last 10 years about what they're doing with this particular Sony connected universe. It just feels like, on top of everything, she also just doesn't fit in with the likes of Morbius and Venom and what I imagine Craven.
Well, I imagine at the time when they were doing this, This was just going to be an origin for the universe, right? Because of their actions, that's why there's no Spider-Man in this universe. I think like that was it. And then at that point, she doesn't need to be a hero or a villain. She's doing what she thinks is right, and then it ends up having dire consequences.
Well, but again, I imagine she was going to be like a Nick Fury or an Amanda Waller, where in realizing that they have fucked up the universe, she was then going to be the thing to get the team together and we have to fix this thing that I messed up, like that whole element of it, and which again fits in with her idea that in the comics it's not that she's like on a good side or a bad side, she's on the side of what she believes destiny, fate to be, like that's what the whole concept is of her. And in that, her leading a team of rather shady people to try and correct a timeline that she messed up, like again makes for a compelling story, right? Like this interesting idea that she's not necessarily a villain, but she's willing to get a team of villains together to fix this shit because it's the best way to go about it. Like really feels like a compelling way to tell her story and show that she's not necessarily good or evil, but rather like this like force. You know, I don't know. I am writing a more interesting story for myself than Sony ever has apparently cared to. So I don't want to keep doing that.
So here's the ending of Madam Web, just so you know. They never get into costumes, as prophesized back in. Oh, I don't have it up anymore. February 9th, like 1997, Itchy is Scratchy and Poochie episode of The Simpsons premieres. And in Poochie's first appearance, Itchy and Scratchy are heading to the fireworks factory. And it was not until February 14th, 2024, where they finally got to the fireworks factory. Milhouse must be thrilled. Thrill host, if you will. Because the beginning of the movie, she goes to a fireworks warehouse where there was a fire, and they put it out before any of the fireworks ignite. And then that is where the friggin' climax end of the film happens, is at this fireworks factory where they show up and they throw flares into all the fireworks boxes because she'll be able to use her like Madam Web powers to like make sure they don't get killed by fireworks, but that Ezekiel does. This is all real shit that happens in Madam Web. I just have to say it. And then she learns at the very end of the fight that she can use her ability to see through time to kind of create ghost versions of herself to be in more than one place at once. She uses it one time, and it is immediately after she saves the three girls, she's like punched in the stomach and never does it again. Again, these are real things that happen in the movie. Then, as she goes to kill Ezekiel, she is hit in the eyes with a firework, blinding her, because Madam Web is known for being blind. She is also paralyzed in this fight. I'm not sure how or why she's paralyzed, but we see her in the hospital. She has on dark glasses. She has a wrap over her eyes, and then it jumps forward like 6 months later, and the three girls live with her. She's in like a paraplegic style wheelchair, right, where she like can barely do anything, and she has on dark sunglasses. And then she does a little monologue about how she will be there for these girls, and these girls will be here for the universe. And it shows her briefly in the costume with the red shades, and then the other three women are Spider Women again. And that's the end of the movie. It doesn't matter. The fact that they are superheroes has no greater effect based on what we've seen in this movie, because they are not really superheroes in this movie, Sejohn.
I gotta tell you, man, this is fucking buck wild. This is really just wild. All I can think is that the only real ad that I ever saw for Madam Web, the only true ad I saw in the wild, I saw previews because like when they announced it was coming out, I would go and find them. But as far as like I came across a thing I wasn't expecting, was a YouTube short of Dakota Johnson, and I believe the line was something along the lines of, "I think you're going to enjoy Madam Web so much you'll have to see it twice." And
You'll want to see it twice.
You'll want to see it twice. I figured it had something to do with the idea that, like, once you get to the twist of the end of this movie, you'll want to go back and see how it all, like M. Night Shyamalan style. Like, you want to see the clues all there all along. The other side of all of this, like, not hearing anything about it, is just also just like, I don't think there's a twist at all. I think that legitimately that ad was just, we think you'll like it enough to see it multiple times, and that is a called shot.
Yeah. I mean, I'd see it again. I'd see it again right now. If I could watch it at home. I don't want to go to the movie theater and do all that again. But when I can see it at home, I will watch it again. Because I did enjoy my time with it. The ways that it plays with, like, her next kind of powers, next being the Nicolas Cage movie. We've said his name enough times this week, right? I'm surprised he didn't just burst through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man. Like, it's cool how she does that. Or like the live, die, repeat sort of thing where like, okay, that didn't work. I've gone back to my save point. Let's try it again. Like I even made a joke in the movie that like, why the save point's got to be so far away from the action scenes? Like, and it's like just a little bit that I made to like have fun with the movie. But yeah, like she's not really Madam Web at any time in this movie. She like discovers her powers when she almost has a near-death experience, and like.
So then, who is this movie for? If it's not for like fans to really sink their teeth into all the Madam Webness, and it's not doing anything to bring in new viewers because it doesn't seem to like it really seems to set up. It really seems to want you to feel it's really important to a thing, but then like never gives you anything to show you that it's important to the grander scheme.
No.
Like,
and that's its biggest offense. I'll agree. I had a really good time with this movie, but like what it seemed to be wanting to do, right, with its February 14th release date was either be that horror movie that comes out on Valentine's Day or that Dakota Johnson movie that comes out on Valentine's Day. Because she's had 4 of those, right? 3 of them were varying shades of gray and then How to Be Single, right? She's like a certified moneymaker if you release her movies on Valentine's Day. And instead of putting her into the big romantic rom-com type film, we're going to put her into one of the Valentine's Day horror movies like Happy Death Day, like Freaky, that are semi remakes of other movies, but like now it's a horror movie. And honestly, like I think that's what Madam Web was originally going to be. Spider-Man, but it's a horror movie. And they weren't allowed to do that, or they shied away from it. Because honestly, there's like this scene where the guy is coming to attack Mary's water breaks and they're like, we got to go to the hospital. And then he's chasing them and she has to save them from Ezekiel coming to kill it because once they leave the house, he's able to track them again. Because, like, I haven't even talked about Jill Hennessy is in this movie for a hot second. Love Jill Hennessy. Crossing Jordan. She's one of my favorite ADAs on Law & Order. I love her as an actor. She is an NSA woman that Ezekiel Sims seduces and kills to get access to the NSA's new facial security software so that he can find these girls and murder them before they murder him in the future. And like I'm like, I like that Jill Hennessy's in this movie. I wish that she had more agency. You know what? Like you say you didn't like Morbius, right? You didn't enjoy Morbius. You at least got to a scene with Al Madrigal in Morbius, right? The cop?
Yes, yeah.
The 2 detectives who are like tracking him down.
Right.
Like, there's none of that. That does not exist in this movie. You don't have like a third party audience kind of XB who is there to observe and comment on all of the things that are going on in the movie. And that's a weird, like, it's the freaking Ben, I can't think of his last name, in Daredevil. Ulrich. It's Ben Ulrich in Daredevil, right? As weird as that movie is, because you have that reporter as this, like, sort of non-biased third party who's just watching everything happen and commenting on it, like, it sort of grounds it in some sort of reality that does not happen in Madam Web.
Yeah, no, it's some type of audience XP that allows like exposition to be, dropped on you in some form would be great.
Yeah. I don't know. It's we've already talked about this. We've almost talked about this movie as long as the movie itself. And I don't know if there's anything more to say here, but it's I enjoyed it. I don't think everybody's going to enjoy it. I'll admit that. And I do think that the grander plan for it was abandoned. And maybe that will be proven incorrect when Kraven comes out, if she is involved in Kraven in some way, shape, or form. If she is the Nick Fury-esque figure who approaches Kraven and is like, I need your help to save the universe. But who knows? Sorry. Huh. All right. We've been here for a while. Is there anything else you want to make sure that you say with this episode?
I got to go see Led Zeppelin Laser Light Show at the planetarium yesterday.
Led Zeppelin Laser Light Show at the planetarium.
I saw the entirety of and then Pink Floyd's The Wall is next week, so we might go do that.
I did not see that. My father doesn't like Pink Floyd. There was a chance where we could have seen a lovely laser show. This is going back to like when I was 10 years old in Florida. And my father's like, I don't care for Pink Floyd.
I don't care for Pink Floyd.
I don't care for Pink Floyd. But yeah. That's cool. What is that like? What's it like going to a laser show at a planetarium in year of their Lord 2024?
I will say that even out here in the middle of good old conservative Utah, there was a lot of weed.
Honestly, that's how you make a laser show.
Even the planetarium workers were, I think, a little stoned.
Cool.
Like, without going too into detail, because like you said, we've already been here too long. I can pretty much guarantee that there was more smoke in that room from the individuals than there was from the actual smoke and lasers.
Than the smoke machines.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It was fun though.
That's cool. I'm glad that you enjoyed that. I can only talk really brief on this because I signed an NDA. I was part of a focus group this week. That's what I did Monday night before the big snow event. And I have to say, it was cool being part of a focus group, right? Being able to offer my opinions on a brand that I have some knowledge behind. But the unexpected consequence of that is that I now don't give a shit about that brand, and I honestly don't know if I'm ever going to give them any more of my money.
Oops.
like it was one of these situations where like I had ideas during the focus group and I'm like, but I'm not going to offer them because it's just going to be a predatory way for them to take advantage of people who love their product. So like I bought into my mouth and I'm like, I'm not going to share that. And then other things about like, I can't talk about what I saw, but some of the things I saw, I was very excited about. And honestly, if they're going to market them the way that they suggested in that, I would not give them my money. Like, it just feels like you're taking advantage of people by doing that. Unintended consequences of a focus group, Sejohn. Did not think I would hit that. I got $100.
I just can't believe that you got into a focus group for Fortnite. I just can't believe that. That's all.
Yeah, right. There it goes. I blew up my spot. Yeah, it was
you secretly, Devon's the #1 player. Ever since Lego Fortnite came out, he's been climbing the ranks.
Shh, Sejohn, you're gonna blow up my spot. But it was a big thing that did happen this week that I wanted to share. One other thing, and it goes back to the Super Bowl. These overtime Super Bowls really fuck up the whole show we're going to give the beautiful slot after the Super Bowl. But Tracker, the CBS's new show about the guy who's a tracker, I made some mean comments last week. I'm so fucking on board for Tracker. It's so good, Sejohn.
Broke records, didn't it? One of the most successful post Super Bowl premieres in history. Yeah.
And again, that's because they had all those things. But the fact that people also stayed around until after the overtime, right, which extended the game by like kind of an hour when you consider all the celebration and everything afterwards.
In a West Coast Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
So it already was kind of starting later in the day than usual.
Right. So it was interesting. But that show, I can't wait till I have 3 more episodes of Tracker under my belt to submit all of the listeners to an extended family like talk about regarding Tracker. But on that same one, since Tracker is something I watched on Paramount Plus and something that we'll keep an eye on and report as more becomes available, Paramount Plus maybe getting bought by Comcast and combined with Peacock.
Yeah, I think it wasn't. I think if I look at our odds board behind me here, I'm pretty sure Paramount Plus was the one that we had at the top for the first one to get eaten, right?
It was that or Peacock. Those were the two that were like, it's one of these two.
Yeah, and then these two just now have decided, well, if we get into this trench coat together and act like a real adult, maybe they'll believe us. So we'll see how that goes.
If we eat each other, we'll live on together. I don't think that's how that works, right? This is still not a Safe Peacock podcast. This is still not a Paramount Plus podcast, but it is something that we're going to keep an eye on because our odds were not wrong, right?
Yeah.
They may not have been in our favor, but we called that shot. So as more information becomes available, we will share it. But it's getting too long anyway. Any final thoughts, Sejohn?
No, I'm good to go.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining us on this kind of extended episode of the Say Report, talking about Man and Web, the Superb Owl, and all of those things. If you have any thoughts that you want to share with us, they can be sent to us at our email address, which is thesayreport@gmail.com. We are also steadily building up the Say Report Discord, and if you would like an invitation, the fastest way to get one is to send a request to thesayreport@gmail.com. Also, if you want me to come and talk about Madam Web on your podcast, your TV show, literally anything, that's the best way to do it. Just put my name in the subject line. Yep. With that, Will, please bring us home. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.